What about this one? Yeah.
Yes, okay, perfect. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for being here for our 7th annual Stanford Medicine Pediatric and Maternal Innovation Showcase. I am so excited and thrilled to see you all here today, and I know we have a great audience on our live stream on YouTube as well. I'm Charlotte Stallworth, and this is our co-host.
Hi, I'm Janine Furch. I'm a neonatologist at Stanford. And we are really thrilled to be here today as well. I'm representing Impact One, which we are a group that started based on Stanford physicians and is funded by wonderful philanthropic support to advanced health technologies, both in the pediatric and maternal health space, all the way through to commercialization to actually get to patient care. So we have a wonderful pitch competition today and 9 amazing finalists that are going to pitch for the money that we raised through philanthropic support. So we're really excited to see them today and thrilled to have you guys here as well.
Thanks, Janine. I'm Charlotte Stallworth. I'm Vice President of Business Development and Innovation at Stanford Medicine Children's Health, where our mission is extraordinary care, breakthrough discoveries, continual learning. And we really work together across Stanford Medicine with our innovative physicians, scientists, IS team, others across the university and hospitals to create, to protect, to test, to launch healthcare innovations. And we're really excited about the agenda we've put together for you today with really a theme on innovating for equity. So really thinking about how your healthcare innovation can impact the access, the healthcare maintenance, the outcomes of all people who could benefit from it. And you'll see today we're going to talk about diversity and equity in patent inventorship, how we use remote monitoring and AI in pediatric and maternal healthcare, and also the pitch competition from
Yay.
Impact One. So we're very excited to have you here. It's going to be an amazing day. So we're going to follow up now with a video from Dean Miner. Can you launch that for me, Adrian? Or Edgar? Thanks so much. Thanks, Janine.
Absolutely.
Good morning. I'm Lloyd Miner, Dean of the School of Medicine and Vice President for Medical Affairs at Stanford University. I'm delighted to welcome you to the 7th Annual Pediatric and Maternal Innovation Showcase. Today's event brings together leading thinkers and researchers in pediatric and maternal health. The speakers you will hear from are focused on how we're improving access to care for women and children through innovative thinking. Take, for example, remote patient monitoring. It flourished out of necessity during the pandemic, especially for children. Now we regard it as an embedded tool in healthcare. But how is it helping overcome barriers to care for underrepresented populations? This is a question that a fantastic panel of experts will explore today. You will also learn about groundbreaking innovations in pediatric and maternal care in a pitch competition that will present creative ideas designed to improve maternal and fetal health. That the competition received more than 40 project submissions across diverse fields is a testament to the ingenuity of our community and their commitment to addressing health disparities and improving pediatric and maternal health. At Stanford Medicine, we pride ourselves on developing and translating innovative approaches that enable us to provide world-class care, especially to expectant parents and their little ones. With new life comes the hope and expectation that our children will be born healthy. But the reality is that doesn't always happen. That's where Stanford's Maternal and Child Health Research Institute plays an essential role. Our physician scientists are at the forefront of discoveries and are actively translating them to benefit children's health. The goal is to bridge the gap between transformational discovery and cures that can save lives. Through unparalleled patient care, education, research, and innovation, we can meet the needs of expectant mothers and their children. These benefits extend beyond the realm of Stanford. Our research and discoveries have the potential to transform maternal and pediatric health and well-being, nationally and globally. Promoting innovative thinking through events like this one is yet another way we're advancing maternal and pediatric health. On behalf of all of us at Stanford Medicine, thank you for coming. I hope you have a great day.
Many thanks to Dean Miner. Now I'll be joined on stage by Lisa Larimore-Willette. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, thanks for
Welcome.
having me.
Thanks for being here.
Of course.
I'm so excited about this conversation. We talked before. I'd
Yes.
like to read your brief bio first. Lisa Larimore-Willette is the Dean F. Johnson Professor of Law at Stanford Law School and recognized for her research on patent litigation, intellectual property, and innovation law. Her recent paper, Improving Equity in Patent Inventorship, discusses inequality in the patent system and subsequent policy concerns. Through evaluating disparities in patenting and biased attribution practices, Professor Willette identifies policy interventions that could improve the innovator-inventor gaps in patent invention rates. And this is an area of keen interest to me, having really had a mission a few years ago to put in place IP policies for the 2 hospitals here at Stanford, really with a focus on having equitable pathway to inventorship for our nurses and other employees of the hospitals, as the university policy establishes for the physicians who are super innovative as well, and the other employees of the university. So Lisa, could you tell us maybe a little bit about yourself and then your interest in this particular area?
Sure. So I came to law from science. I did a PhD in physics before I went to law school, and have long been interested in innovation, including inequalities in innovation. I mean, seeing just physics is not the most diverse field in terms of any measure of diversity. And so the issue of like who is involved in our innovation system and what kinds of innovations they're producing is something that I've long been interested in. And this particular project I started working on with Professor Colleen Chen, who's a professor at Berkeley Law, who's also focuses a lot on innovation and inequality. Also, it's a woman from science who came into law, and she got me involved in her initiative on thinking about diversity and innovation. And so this particular project, we're thinking about who's being listed on patents and why inequalities there are worse than inequalities on like who's being credited as an author on scientific papers.
Really interesting. Could you, just for background to help everyone understand, could you briefly explain the patent system and highlight why the system is important in generating innovation?
Sure. So the basic idea of a patent is that if you are the first person to create a new innovation, then you can get a patent which gives you a right to exclude other people from making, using, selling that innovation for 20 years from when you filed for the patent. And the underlying logic here is that for innovations that are costly to create but relatively cheap to copy, if we didn't have something like a patent, there might not be sufficient incentives to create these innovations in the first place. I think, interestingly, the research on exactly what role patent law plays in generating innovation and the best way to have those incentives while also creating sufficient access to those innovations. There's like lots of interesting policy issues there. But while some of those social benefits are contested, I mean, it's clear that patents have enormous private benefits for the people who are receiving them. And I think it's important to think about equity and who's receiving those benefits.
Thank you so much. Could you also then give kind of an overview of your paper and maybe some of the conclusions you've drawn?
Yeah, I mean, so the paper is really tackling what we're calling the innovator-inventor gap, this empirical fact that the inequalities in who's being listed on patents are worse than other measures of innovation. Like, for example, women are hold 29% of STEM jobs in science, technology, engineering, but are less than 13% of patent inventors. And one study of scientific research teams found that women were 13% less likely to be named as authors on papers in those teams, even controlling for seniority and field, but 58% less likely to be named as inventors on the patents coming out of those teams. And studies of patent paper pairs, like when the same innovation leads to both a scientific paper and a patent, shows these same inequalities, that women and junior scientists are more likely to be left off the patent even when they're on the paper. So we're really tackling the literature related to that, both synthesizing some of the existing empirical literature, putting forth a hypothesis on that we think hasn't received sufficient attention on what might be driving this, and setting some ideas for what we might do going forward, because actually there's not great empirical evidence on what is causing any of these problems.
Yeah, that's to me very compelling. I think the Patent Office has recently, I think really tried to be more open to women, and there have been a lot of classes and things like that to try to help women entrepreneurs enter the patent system and be more available. But I also think that there are some findings in your paper that also may require additional changes, maybe at government level, but also in academic. Maybe could you talk a little bit about attribution bias and biased attributions and some other practices that really may be impacting the disparities we're seeing?
Sure. I mean, so there's really two main classes of hypotheses on what might be causing this. So if you have the situation where the same, say we have a scientific innovation where a female member of the research team is on the paper and is left off the patents, what is causing that? So one hypothesis is related to kind of bias in attribution. That, I mean, we know there's evidence that for something like who's being listed on a paper, there's evidence of some implicit bias in who's credited with that research, and maybe those biases are worse when we're talking about a patent that comes with some financial benefits in addition to the scientific credit. And so this concern about implicit bias has received some attention, and there's some literature on that. I think the other potential explanation that has received less attention, which is one of the things that Colleen and I try to highlight in this paper, is that there's really a difference in the legal standard for who can be recognized on a patent. And this is something that I don't think a lot of people in the innovation space are sufficiently aware of, that the norms for who can be listed on a scientific paper are more familiar to people in academia, that generally the people in that lab who are making some substantial contribution, whether it is getting the funding or coming up with the initial idea or running the experiments, doing analysis, there's lots of stages of any paper, and then often all of those people get to be listed as authors. But under the US patent law rules for who can legally be listed as an inventor on a patent, it's much more restrictive. You have to have contributed to what patent law calls the conception of the invention, which is really coming up with the initial idea, the idea as recognized in whatever you're claiming. So someone who isn't involved in that initial conception, but does a lot of the hard work and then figuring out how does this idea work in practice, running all the experiments, the things that can actually take much more time and effort, they can't be listed as a patent. And so if a junior scientist in the lab is only contributing to those later stages of invention, then they can't be listed. So that's a kind of different explanation that I think hasn't received sufficient attention, that has to do with these differences in standards.
Yeah, that's definitely important to understand. And I think as we are facilitating innovation, not just among those who have already launched companies and maybe understand the patent law and the rules of inventorship, there are a lot of people who kind of maybe enter this realm and are not aware, and then maybe become associated with other people who say they're inventors as well, and there's kind of a muddling going forward because of lack of understanding in the initial stages. So I really think it's important that we as innovators in this space, if we're facilitating innovation or supporting or actually innovating ourselves, that we educate ourselves on the pathway and really try to make those important decisions. That being said, I would think there are some maybe speak more on the education part of how maybe minorities, certain populations are maybe not even at the starting gate for patent inventorship because of a lack of understanding of certain things or access or even funding, right? Because it's not free.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many problems and barriers along the path toward getting a patent. I mean, some of which have nothing to do with the patent system. I mean, starting with just the way the education system works, and there's lots of good empirical work on this, that just differences in opportunity for children and like exposure to innovators at a young age makes a huge difference. And that's not an issue of how we're designing the patent system. It's much broader issues that are also really important to be investigating. So what I've been thinking about as someone who focuses on patent law is like, what role do patent institutions play? And I think that it's important both to be educating people who are potential innovators about their role here and thinking about ways to bring more people into this innovation community, like have more people recognize that they can be an innovator who can create a patentable invention and have the benefits that accumulate from that, including not just financial benefits, but also the career and reputational benefits of being a patent inventor. And so part of that is kind of educating innovators, but also the people who are involved in patent institute, like administering patents, patent departments, patent lawyers who are deciding, okay, well, now we have an invention, who should get credit for this? I think it's important to be thinking about those systems from an inclusive design perspective and recognizing that not everyone's going to feel equally comfortable with a system that's focused on putting yourself forward. And so making sure you're correctly recognizing everyone who legally does deserve to be there.
That's really interesting to think about. I think having more, I guess, recognition, as you're saying, from inside the system would very much help draw people in who are kind of like on the cusp of moving forward, and maybe they're kind of intimidated. If there were like a welcoming path forward with U.S. Patent Office and other offices that facilitate patenting, even with our, on campus and in corporate areas, there are technology offices that help employees determine if they're going to file. And I think being aware of that, how some people are coming forward, maybe could help have more success, or at least a more pleasant experience. Because as we speak about patenting, of course, all of you in the innovation space know that most inventions do not meet criteria for patent protection, and there's a lot of failure in trying again and again to move forward for achieving patent. And there are some inventions or innovations that really might not require patent protection in order to be commercialized. So there is a lot of thoughtfulness that goes into moving forward there. Can you talk about, we're talking a little bit about the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Are there some initiatives that you're seeing there that make you feel hopeful? And if there are some other elements you'd like them to kind of throw into the pot as they're kind of advancing and changing the way they do things?
Yeah, absolutely. So the current director of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, Kathy Vidal, thinking about equity in invention is one of her main initiatives that she's been talking about as she's touring the country, talking to different groups of stakeholders in the patent system. And she's already taken efforts to try to make the patent system more inclusive and reduce some of these barriers. And so, for example, one initiative that's already been implemented is changing the way people are welcomed into the patent system. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with like the process of getting a patent, but typically you send in your initial patent application, and almost always the initial response from the patent office is something that's called either a rejection or a final rejection, which for people who aren't familiar with patents, they don't realize that really this is like a revise and resubmit. Like most patent applications, the initial response from the patent examiner is, well, here's some things that happened before such that I think your invention might not actually be novel, or the way you wrote your patent claims is a little too broad. And typically a patent applicant can then respond and change the way they have their patent claims to make them a little bit narrower or different, or say, well, I think the examiner actually got this wrong. And most applicants who persist through this process, usually you can find something that you did that actually is deserving of patent protection that might not be the initial claim you were trying to get. But it might not look like that from the outside. And there's evidence on a gender difference in who persists through this. That actually, like, a lot of the gender gap in patents is that not in who's filing the patents in the first place, but that after you get that initial rejection, women are less likely to come back and say, okay, let me try again and do the revise and resubmit. So what Director Vidal has done is, rather than having the first thing you get from the patent office be this rejection, now you get a welcome letter saying, like, thank you for submitting a patent. Welcome to the patent system. Like, here's a detail of what this process looks like, and just trying to demystify some of it so that it doesn't seem so strange to people who don't have familiarity with what the process looks like.
That's wonderful. I think, some of the efforts that my team has looked at, and I know a lot of others, is helping to educate youngsters in the community and try to expose people to how things work and how the patent system works early on, so that maybe they can spread that to their friends and kind of have a grassroots effort of understanding this. But a lot of people find this topic very dry and boring, right? But really, I think it's compelling and important if you're considering bringing an invention to the public, especially for healthcare, which is so expensive. That protection is vital for any kind of investment to occur. So I'm really glad we're talking about this. Are there any other maybe policy interventions that you think could be effective here?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of things that we should try, and we have not great evidence on exactly where the problems are or which policy interventions would be most effective, but I don't think that's an excuse for inaction. I think that means that stakeholders at various pieces of the system should be designing policy experiments to learn more about what works. So this is one of the things that Colleen and I have been working on, is finding partners who are willing to experiment with this, which can be private companies, it can be university tech transfer offices, it can be the USPTO. I mean, anyone who's involved in any piece of the patent system has some role to play here. And so, if you are a company that has a patent team and is creating an invention, you want to make sure that the people who are being recognized on patents are really everyone who should be recognized. So we're working on a pilot to have an additional step to that check of who should be listed on this patent, so that it's not just the initial disclosure from the inventor where it's the lead inventor saying, well, these are the main people, without a lot of check on that. If you specifically ask, well, tell me everyone who was involved in any stage of this, whether you think they should be on the patent or not, who are they and what did they do? And then have someone with the legal training to say, okay, well, these people, there's some other people who should be on the patent who weren't on your initial list. And then also thinking about the people who contributed to the invention in a way that doesn't legally qualify for inventorship. Are there things that can be done to recognize their contribution in a way that perhaps encourages them to be innovating more? So if a private company has people who contributed, not at the level of inventorship, but in some meaningful way, they ran the experiments, or if they get some recognition of, even a LinkedIn badge, I am a contributor to this patent, does that then make them more likely to engage in the patent system and later on? Maybe that seems plausible to me, at least worth testing. Or the patent office, they list on the front page of a patent who the inventors are, and there's some legal benefits that come with that. But they could also list people who contributed to the invention that doesn't come with any formal legal benefit in terms of ownership of the patent or rights related to that, but that has perhaps some of those same reputational benefits and changing how people are thinking of themselves.
I think that's a great idea. It really, it's kind of twofold, keeping people kind of involved in the process and understanding there's some benefit to them, even if they're not going to be considered an owner of the patent. How would you I'm sure you and Colleen have considered putting forth some of this work, or is there still additional data to gather to make a compelling case?
Yeah, I mean, so we are in various stages with some private firms that are starting to work on these experiments, and it will take some time. I mean, as anyone who's worked on any real world field experiment, it takes time to figure out a way to make that work within the within your partner's business mission, and then to collect the data and report that. But it's exciting that so many people are interested in this. And there's lots of firms that are interested in improving equity and innovation. I mean, not just from a good-hearted, like this is important for increasing equity, but like it can matter to your bottom line. Like there are lots of people within a company that can contribute to good ideas, and you want to make sure you're getting ideas from all of them, which affects not just like who's innovating, but also what kinds of innovations are being generated. Like there's good evidence related to our topic today that all female inventor teams are more likely to produce innovations that focus on women's health. And so if you have more women who are part of the patent system, then you'll have more innovation related to maternal health.
That's wonderful. And I guess you could take that thought further in thinking that if you have more inventors from diverse populations or underserved populations, they may be closer to certain issues faced by that population. And if you have more inventors there, you have more inventions and interventions that could help whatever they're identifying, that other inventors who are not part of that population may not even see that there's a problem.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I'll know I keep focusing on gender primarily because that's where a lot of the empirical work is. And we actually don't have great information about the demographics of people involved in the innovation system because it is not currently, like the patent office doesn't collect this information. So the scholars who are studying this are primarily having to rely on proxies, and there's reasonably good, from a statistical perspective, classifiers by name based on rough binary gender. Like if someone is named Lisa on a patent, they're more likely to be female, and so people can get some estimate of gender effects from that. These classifiers are less good at identifying race and other measures of diversity, but I think those same principles apply.
That's really interesting. And I would think if that data has not been gathered and it's not available as kind of a baseline, maybe that's unfortunate, but still the patent office and others can take efforts to increase that diversity anyway, with an assumption that it would produce a wider range of innovations of use to the world, right? Mm-hmm. So a kind of a general kind of platform for going forward.
Yeah, and I think the patent office is considering allowing people to at least voluntarily disclose demographic information along with their inventor information, which could help with some of these efforts going forward at just understanding what's going on.
Yeah, I think they would definitely need to provide some information about that first as well, because I think, you know, as a minority woman myself, I might think, well, is this designed to help me or to like keep me out, right? So mm-hmm. I think it really has to have some kind of other effort going along with it. So maybe, are there any kind of existing frameworks or barriers in our systems that we should like be aware of? I mean, all of us, some of us are here from Stanford, other academic institutions or startups, or maybe even outside of healthcare. Are there some barriers that we should be looking for and from your perspective?
I mean, I think anyone can be thinking about, like, from wherever they are situated within the innovation ecosystem, are there ways that their institution, like whatever they can control, that they could help generate better evidence on what is effective going forward? And that could be an intervention providing greater education to people who are involved in your organization. It could be an intervention focused specifically on patenting and who's recognized. But I think the important thing is to have more policy experiments that involve really rigorous evidence. I mean, and that's the problem with the work here. I mean, coming from a hard science to a social science, there's not a lot of work in the patent system that involves a plausible control group, like some counterfactual where you can say, well, this mentorship program that I created for women innovators, it has this much effect because here's a like actually plausible control group. And so you'll have people who do something that could be really promising, like a new pipeline mentorship program, which is like one of the many innovations that policy interventions that people have been trying. But there's not really good evidence on what impact pipeline mentorship programs have, because most of them have not been designed in a way to allow you to rigorously evaluate their impact. So thinking about, well, if I'm going to design this, maybe I have a scarcity of slots in it, and so I will take a bunch of applications and then randomize among them and be able to compare the people who I've now put in my program with the others and see, like, what impact, quantifiable impact does this actually have?
That's great guidance. Thank you. I think we will maybe take a few questions.
Sure.
Okay, does that work? We'd love to give you all an opportunity to ask any questions. Yes, in the back there.
You can also use the QR code on your table to enter questions there.
Hi, I'm Lisa Malloy with Maternal Medical. I had a question about, is there any rule of thumb to sort of delineate between inventorship and reduced to practice?
It's a good question. So, in patent jargon, the invention process begins with conception, which is kind of coming up with this idea, and then you have reduction to practice, which is roughly like seeing if this actually works in the real world. From a patent law perspective, the conception is having a definite and permanent idea of the invention. It's not super clear what the line is, and I think that subjectivity is part of the problem, that there is some wiggle room for exactly who should qualify there. But there have been some cases where people have been unable to be listed based on work they've done for reduction to practice. Like, there's one famous case involving work with some NIH scientists who did I think it was a HIV drug where they had a proprietary cell line to test whether the molecule was effective. And so the company had come up with the molecule. These NIH scientists had done a lot of work in testing and seeing that this actually was effective in treating HIV/AIDS. And they then tried to get listed on the patent, and the court said, no, this work that you did, even though you were the lead authors on the corresponding scientific papers, that's not enough to be contributing to the conception of the invention, the idea of using this molecule to treat HIV, which the people at the private company had done. So it can matter, and if you improperly list inventors, that can be a ground for patent invalidity. So you want to try to get it right and talk to patent lawyers, but I agree it's not crystal clear.
Hi, I'm Juliana Pearl with Impact One. I'm curious if you're aware of any international policies or laws in other countries that we could draw inspiration from and are helping improve equity in this space.
That's a good question. I think there's also not great evidence from other countries. And even on basic things about how the patent system is working, the question of, does strengthening patent protection increase research investments in a field? You would think we would have strong evidence on that at this point. And we don't, because patents both create some incentive for creating a new invention, but also raise the costs for subsequent innovators because you have to license and the earlier patents in your field. So increasing the strength of patents overall, from both a theoretical and empirical perspective, it's ambiguous. And the state of empirical evidence on any of these patent policy questions, including abroad, is embarrassingly low. So unfortunately, I think no.
Hi, my name is Riva Adagarla. I'm a high schooler from the Bay Area. I wanted to ask, how successful have you been in bringing more women into the patent, to have their names on the patents? I noticed you mentioned about surveys, about demographics. How successful have you been in bringing more women into patent leadership?
So I would say at this point, I personally have not been successful in that. My work has been more focused on trying to understand why women have not been listed on patents, and then trying to think about how can we design policy interventions to improve that. So maybe if you ask me in a year when we have results from some of these experiments we're doing with companies, I'll have more information on, oh, we did bring in some people who otherwise wouldn't have been listed. But I think that's an exciting thing about this field. And we don't know what the most effective policies are, but hopefully we will be able to figure that out.
Hi, Lisa. I'm Sarvesh here. So I'm a medtech inventor myself. I had my robotics startup before. So when I decided to go into patenting, I tried to speak to a few lawyers, but it was super expensive just to speak to them. So I started learning it myself. I took a lot of courses from WIPO, then took courses at the Harvard Law School. So one thing I found out that even if we are engineers, it was not too hard to understand the basics of the patenting, but there is no system for democratizing it. So what are some of your ideas to democratize the system for education?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you're right. There are a lot of barriers to getting involved in patenting. Working with a lawyer is expensive, and I think it's worth thinking about ways to lower those barriers to entry and providing legal services. I have tried to help people learn about the patent system. I have a free patent law book at patentcasebook.org for you can get the free PDF there to learn a bit about the patent system. The patent office has been taking initiatives along these lines. In addition to the welcome letter approach I described, they ran a randomized controlled trial at the patent office on a new examination unit there of patent examiners who were specifically trained to work with patent applicants who didn't have legal representation. And so these patent examiners got training on how to help demystify the system, to explain the process. And they did this in a randomized way where they, because of the scarcity of people in this new unit, some applications went to them and some went through the traditional process. And they found that the applications that went to this new unit, it completely closed the gender gap in the areas where it was worst for these applicants who didn't have legal counsel. So I think thinking about efforts like that and how to expand that to help people who don't have legal counsel, as well as reducing the cost of legal counsel, and thinking about tools like using AI to improve access to justice and efforts like that are many of the exciting opportunities going forward.
Are there any other questions? Jesus, did you have a question? Yeah. Well, wonderful. Lisa, thank you so much for being here today. I really love this conversation. I appreciate being able to discuss these questions with you, and I'm sure everyone got a lot out of the conversation. I'm sure people will be following up with you regarding your free book as well.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, everyone. And I will be followed by Dr. Anu Dayal, who will introduce our pitch competition and get it going. Thanks so much.
So good morning, everybody. We're super excited to have you. My name's Anu Dayal. I'm a pediatrician here at Stanford.
And Sheth, I'm co-director of Impact One and a pediatric urologist here at Stanford. Okay, I just wanted to go ahead and give a quick overview of Impact One and the work that we've been doing for the last several years. And this is our second annual pitch competition for maternal health. We've started as a group that was very focused on pediatric health and improving the underserved markets for improved innovation in children. And we've since realized, there's more than just that time when they're a child, but right before, during the maternal period. And that's what motivated us to start focusing our efforts in maternal medicine as well. And this is now our second annual pitch competition for maternal health specifically. We have another pitch competition that just occurred last month for pediatric, and so we're really excited to be able to continue doing 2 pitch competitions a year to provide seed funding and encourage innovators both nationally and internationally. I just wanted to quickly give a little overview of Impact One. As you can see here, our team has been growing. You heard from Janine, my co-director, earlier when at the start, and then afterwards, We've expanded to include numerous fellows. Anu is also part of our team and our chief of staff who's helped organize a lot of the event today. We've been able to, we started with funding from the Pediatric Device Consortium with the FDA, but we've since expanded to include gifts from many private donors, as well as the Cottrell Foundation, the Gates Foundation, and we're excited to continue expanding our reach to help more companies in this process. And so far, we've supported 147 plus projects. We've expanded to both pediatric, neonatal, which I think is really exciting because it's a small, really niche, important market, and then now as well maternal, which we'll continue to do today. So without further ado, I'll give it over to Anu to talk more about the pitch competition and get this going, and I'm excited to hear all our pitches today.
Thanks so much, Kun. So we'll go ahead and start our pitch competition. We had over 45 applicants for this competition today, so we are so excited to hear from all of them. And if we can just hit the next slide. Or do we have a clicker? Okay, perfect. One more. Yeah, perfect. So we have 9 finalists that you see here. They will be presenting in this order, and the last 2 will be remote. I wanted to introduce our judges. We have Paul Hooper, who is the former CEO of Gigamon, and he is a remote judge today, and we'll hear from him. We have Jyoth Kanapan. She is Senior Associate at Intuitive Ventures. We have Dr. Anna Gerson, who's Director of Research on OBGYN here at Stanford School of Medicine. We have Gail Cuoco, who is the CFO of Fogarty Innovation. We have Jesus Sapero, who is our Senior Vice President and Chief Nursing Officer here at Stanford Children's Health and LPCH. And then finally, we have Ari Moskowitz, who is our Deputy Director of Devices at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So thank you so much for joining us. They will be judging the teams today on the following 5 judging criteria: on the clinical need, the technology of the company, the value proposition, the regulatory strategy, and also the commercialization potential. And we wish good luck to everybody. And we will start with our first pitch from Seconia Medical. And so for all the contestants, we'll be holding up signs. The pitch itself is going to be 5 minutes, and then we'll have 3 minutes for questions.
Hello, everyone. It's wonderful being here. My name is Ronnie Cantor-Balan. I'm founder and CEO of Seconia Medical. At Seconia Medical, we are revolutionizing the vaginal exams that every woman is going through during labor and are currently done by fingers. Our device standardizes how these exams are conducted and interpreted to reduce errors, risks, and pain for patients. We're working with top-notch clinicians as well as with product development and biz dev experts with decades of experience. Some of you may be familiar with Dr. Avi Tzur, who was a visiting fellow here at Stanford and is currently head of the Women's Health Innovation at Sheba. As for myself, I'm a biomedical engineer with over 15 years of experience in the medical device space, focusing on lasers and optics. I have several patents and publications, and I held a research position at MIT. We're backed by the Lardell and the MHub funds, who invest in life-saving technologies and in medical device companies. So why is this problem that we're solving so critical? Because vaginal exams are used for obtaining key information required for monitoring labor progress and for making critical labor decisions like whether to do a C-section or an induction. They are a cornerstone in labor management. Currently, they're done by inserting fingers through the vaginal canal to assess cervical dilation, cervical effacement, and fetal head station and position. As a mother of 3 kids myself, and like so many other women, I also experienced the well-known issues with the vaginal exams, and that's why I founded Seconia Medical. There is a high error rate with these exams that leads to uncertainty in the decision-making process. There are redundant exams that are costly and lead to inefficient workflows for providers. Many women find these exams painful and stressful and traumatic, and there's a high risk of morbidity and mortality due to infections. Our solution is an AI-powered imaging device that is used for standardizing the measurements of fetal and cervical parameters. It empowers medical staff at different skill levels to take reliable and repeatable measurements. The device itself combines ultrasound, optics, and machine learning to automatically provide images and data on a user interface. It works with a disposable unit and is designed to be woman-friendly. We're offering significant benefits to the different stakeholders. We're offering improved patient experience due to the reduced pain and stress. We're standardizing providers' workflow, basing it on data and accuracy. And we're saving hospitals a lot of money. Based on studies, as well as an extensive research we did with Duke University, a hospital that is using our device can get up to $1.3 million in cost savings. Some of these areas of savings are due to reduced infections, reduced early admissions, reduced interventions, and time savings for staff. For a business model, we have three main revenue streams: device sales to hospitals and clinics, recurrent revenues from disposable parts, and subscription to our global data and image bank. The hospital expense is $129 per patient and will be covered by DRG bundles and CPT codes. So the purchasing decision here is easy. When a hospital on average is reimbursed $13K for a vaginal birth, the additional $129 for our device is minimal. And on top of that, there are the cost savings that I showed on the previous slide. Needless to say, this is a huge market with 140 million women who give birth annually worldwide. And the beautiful thing here is that our device is needed at any labor and delivery scenario, which brings me to our remote home monitoring solution. Our device will be prescription initiated and fully covered by CPT codes. We're offering improved access to care, a peace of mind to pregnant patients, and improving resources of workflow at the hospitals. We've gained significant traction so far with 4 medical centers interested in collaborating with us. We have a working prototype, and we're patent pending. I'm going to skip to the end here. Thank you, everyone. If you want to see a short video of our prototype, come see me later. I'm happy to take any questions.
Can you describe the regulatory plan? Does this need to go through any kind of approvals for the FDA or anyone else?
Yes. We met with the FDA last year, and we plan to meet with them soon again. Right now, we're pursuing the 510K Class 2. We have identified several predicates that are mainly ultrasound-based, and we plan to get that confirmation by the end of this year.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for your presentation. I had 2 questions. How many devices would you have you planned a regular labor and delivery unit would have, and how would you be able to use the same device with multiple patients? And the second question I had was, could this device be used when the membranes have been ruptured? Have you considered that?
Yes. So for the first question, talking with clinicians, they suggest that they have one in each delivery room so that all the rooms are standardized and they don't need to move the device from one room to another, as well as have several at the triage area depending on the size of the hospital. The idea is for one device to be used throughout labor for one patient. It does require disposable units, so each time the exam is conducted, there's going to be a usage of one disposable. After the labor is done and the patient is actually not using the device anymore, the device will be sent to be cleaned or be cleaned on site, depending on the hospital procedure for that. For the other question, for early rupture of membranes, we don't see any issue. Why not? I understand that for these situations, sometimes a sterile speculum is used. This is the same idea. The device will be sterile. The disposable will be sterile. It will have a sterile sleeve covering it. So by all means. In addition to that, the device is not contacting the cervix compared to the two fingers. So it needs actually to be in a distance from the cervix to be able to gather the information. And that gives it an advantage in situations like early rupture of membranes.
So I have a question. Anytime you introduce a new method of measuring something, there's still the translation of what does that measurement mean and how do you take action. So do you have any evidence about the ability for this technology to be translated into what somebody does, to action?
So that's a great question. Obviously, this is going to be a rollout, and it will have stages where at first it's just providing measurements, and the decision will be completely up to the clinician. It will always be up to the clinician. But the idea is for us to start gathering data. And as I mentioned, we're going to have a global data and image bank, which will be the first of its kind, because nobody's ever collected the images that we're going to collect. And then we're going to apply our machine learning and AI on that in order to make correlations between all these parameters and labor outcomes. And at that point, we'll be able to make those connections and have some recommendations going forward.
And is there any evidence that imaging versus tactile feedback from fingers is translatable?
There are a ton of studies that show how imaging can be superior to tactile, especially when so many providers are involved, again, at different skill levels. You have the high error rate for the same user, but also between users. Obviously, there's variability. What we're trying to do is make this completely user independent, and regardless of the level of the provider, they will get the same measurement over and over again. And so when you introduce the imaging to that, you're getting a superior way of doing that, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next we'll have Radian Oximetry, who is pitching Daisy. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Neil Ray, CEO and founder of Radian Oximetry, and we are on a mission to improve outcomes for mothers and babies during childbirth by developing medical technologies. We're developing 3 programs at the moment. 2 are in fetal monitoring, and 1 is in postpartum hemorrhage. Today, I'd like to discuss with you our postpartum hemorrhage asset known as Daisy. Daisy was developed with the notion that we wanted to treat the highest risk patient for developing postpartum hemorrhage, and could we possibly prevent postpartum hemorrhage from developing versus just treating it. So every 4 minutes, a woman dies from postpartum hemorrhage around the globe. Excessive bleeding leads to postpartum hemorrhage, which is often caused by urinary and when the uterus fails to restore baseline tone. PPH leads to significant morbidity, mortality, including death, infertility, birth trauma, hysterectomy, etc., etc. As you can imagine, the financial and economic and emotional turmoil of this is unimaginable. There's one patient population in particular that's at highest risk for developing PPH, and that's the woman who goes and undergoes an elective C-section with an unlabored cervix. Because she's undergoing major abdominal surgery, her risk of developing PPH is twice as high versus a vaginal delivery, And because her cervix is unlabored, if she were to bleed, that blood tends to pool in the uterus, leading to a delayed diagnosis of PPH. And for every 5 minutes of delay in diagnosis of PPH, morbidity goes up by 30%. So recently, there's been some innovation in the PPH space. A product called Jada was launched a few years ago, but Jada is contraindicated when the cervix is less than 3 centimeters dilated. Also, there is a product by Gauss Surgical called the Triton, which quantifies blood loss, but any blood loss that occurs in the uterus cannot be quantified by the Triton system. So we've developed DAISY. DAISY is a surgical therapeutic medical device designed to quantify blood loss after a C-section and prevent PPH by utilizing suction. DAISY is inserted surgically during a C-section after removal of the baby and the placenta. It is attached to a suction canister and suction through the vaginal introitus. That suction action allows for blood loss to be removed and quantified, and the suction allows for uterine tone to be restored and uterine atony to be treated. We believe that utilizing this technique would prevent PPH by restoring uterine tone and preventing postpartum atony. We presented DAISY to the FDA in September of 2023, and we were able to get DAISY cleared as a surgical drain to quantify blood loss post C-sections. We decided to take this approach because we knew that by doing a large pivotal study of an approved device would be a lot easier than utilizing or performing pivotal study of an investigational device. So now our plan is to do a post-market study of DAISY. The study's been IRB approved to begin in Norfolk, Virginia next month with the idea that by adding suction to DAISY, we can restore uterine tone. We're working with Dr. George Sadi at Eastern Virginia Medical Center in Norfolk, Virginia. He's the chair of OB/GYN, associate dean in women's health, editor-in-chief of American Journal of Perinatology. We have a 10-patient study scheduled where we'll be using the PUS scale to measure and quantify uterine involution with the addition of suction. From there, we plan to apply for breakthrough status with the FDA and enter a pivotal study of 120 patients, RCT with 2 arms. 60 patients will have DAISY inserted with suction, 60 patients will get it DAISY inserted without suction, and we want to demonstrate that the addition of suction can restore uterine tone. We believe that DAISY is a $1 billion market in the US, which is 5 to 10 times bigger than Jada, and Jada was acquired for $240 million a few years ago. Globally, we want to make sure that this technology accesses those who need it the most. There's 38 million C-sections performed in the United States, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Neil?
Thanks, Neil. That was great. Just a question about the device. I understand the regulatory strategy and clinical plan. Do you anticipate any other design changes post the coming study?
Not so much design changes, but manufacturing changes. So we're looking to invest in a single cavity liquid injection molding tool. It's about $200,000, and that'll allow us to get the cost of goods of our technology down to $10. And then with that, we can make sure that this technology is deployed globally.
Thank you. Is the intent that this would be used with every C-section, or would there be certain criteria when it would be used and not?
Yeah, so initially we would address women who are at higher risk of developing PPH. And the CMQCC has a list of women who have risk factors for developing PPH. But the reality is that women at low risk are actually more likely, or the women at low risk have more numbers of PPH than women at high risk. So to really prevent PPH from developing, you would have to address all women getting C-sections.
On that note, Neil, would be super curious to hear about any sort of health economic outcomes research that might, be motivating the pricing of this particular instrument, given that you'd be using it on all women getting C-sections as opposed to just the subset with higher risk.
For sure. Couple things on that. So Jada sells currently for $1,600, and they did $40 million in sales 2 years after FDA clearance. We have a responsibility to get the costs out of healthcare. Now, we know Pitocin costs a couple dollars per unit. Methergin costs about $150 per unit. Prostaglandin costs $800 per unit. Tranexaminase costs about $50, but a unit of blood costs about $1,500. And so when you look at the health economics, there is an opportunity for us to be a profitable corporation, but also get the cost out of healthcare. And so we still need to do that pricing sensitivity for the US, but we think that the numbers work. Globally, we're targeting an ASP less than $100 because we think that's where we need to be in order to get this adopted where it's needed the most.
We have a question from Paul Hooper, who is remote. Paul, can you hear us? Paul?
Appreciate you giving that. Quick question for me. So you're saying, can you go back over the TAM size? You said it's $1 billion TAM?
That's correct. With 1.2 million C-sections performed in the United States, if we targeted an ASP in the US of $800, which would be half the ASP of Jada, it would be $1 billion TAM. Globally, with the blended ASP of $100 and 38 million C-sections, it'd be about a $4 billion TAM.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And we have time for one more question if anyone has one. Okay. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
One more question?
Oh,
Yeah, so actually one of our endpoints that we're considering is postoperative endometritis. And we think that the addition of suction will actually reduce post-op endometritis, but it's something we need to study. What about the skin? Yeah, so it's a sterilized product that's inserted sterilely during surgery through the hysterotomy and passed through the vaginal canal. And so it's going from a sterile to a non-sterile field.
And I'm sure Neil will be happy to answer more questions after the pitch competition. So thank you so much, Neil.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that. Thank you. And our next company will be UC Berkeley and University of Zurich, pitching the Feto Patch. Do we have them here? Feto Patch? Oh, okay, perfect. Great, no worries. And we'll be limiting the questions to our judges only, but everyone is happy to discuss after the pitch competition. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I represent an academic team from UC Berkeley and University of Zurich. We are addressing an important problem in fetal surgery. And so I'm a professor and chair of bioengineering at UC Berkeley. My colleagues I'll introduce in a minute. The problem that we're trying to solve is premature rupture of membranes, which can be either spontaneous. Worldwide numbers are very large there, 4 million per year, 3% of all pregnancies, and also iatrogenic PROM, where surgeons will treat spina bifida and some other defects in utero, and 30% of those procedures end up in PROM. And so just to put some context to the complications are both human and economic. The human complications relate to preterm birth, particularly early in gestation where you have very low survival. It increases dramatically after 22 weeks. But then you also have, even if the infant survives, you have complications such as, well, it's not appearing here, but this is respiratory distress in the red curves there. 50% of preterm PROM patients deliver within the first week. And when it occurs early in gestation, 14% fetal survival when it occurs before 22 weeks. So the unmet need here is a device that surgeons can use at the end of the procedure, the intervention, to seal the defect that they create when they're exiting the wound. And this will improve fetal morbidity or mortality and also significant reduction in healthcare costs. So we've been working on this problem in my lab. I'm an engineer, so we develop sealant materials for general medical surgery. We've been working on this muscle-inspired sealant. I don't have enough time to tell you about that, but muscles use very elegant solutions to bond to surfaces in wet environments, including very sophisticated proteins, and we've developed adhesive materials, synthetic adhesives that mimic those proteins. And we've been working with fetal surgeons since about 2010 to try and develop these adhesives for use in surgical sealing of the defects. These are delivered as two-component liquids. So you could see the double-barrel syringe there. It's really complicated, and the reason I'm here today is because of two very recent discoveries on our team and also our colleagues' team in Zurich, which relate to newer and better ways to deliver a sealant patch to the womb. So our colleagues in Zurich developed this really creative engineering solution to the patch where it basically looks like an umbrella. The umbrella is fed into the womb, deploys the canopy. You can see these pictures here. This is the trocar here. This is the inside of a sheep womb. The canopy is deployed and it's pulled up against the womb, the wall of the uterus. And then our sealant is injected inside of that canopy, and then it glues the device in place. And we just completed and published recently a study in sheep where we got very significant results, 100% survival of the ewes and 91% survival of the fetuses using this device combined with our medical adhesive. So the other development is a new adhesive we developed in my lab, where we found in a mouse model of fetal membrane sealing 100% survival when we use the patch. This is no longer a liquid, it's a patch, and this changes the game. So the combination of this device with our adhesive eliminates the need for liquid adhesive and accelerates the deployment of the device and onto the tissue. And we expect that this can be accomplished in about 2 minutes. So the value proposition relates primarily to the baby, shorter NICU stays, higher quality of life. Of course, the economics are amazing here, $9,000 per day, at least in one hospital for NICU. And if we can extend the gestation for just 1 week, we can save, it's been estimated that we can save $37,000. There's other value propositions for the mother and the hospital and physician, of course. So here's our technology plan, which is prototype and bench test, preclinical test in sheep, and in parallel develop our regulatory and quality plan, file patent protection. The regulatory plan will be likely a humanitarian device exemption. Thank you very much for your time.
Quick question. How do you guide the deployment of the device itself? Visualize
Usually,
it.
I think they're guiding it with ultrasound guidance. Although it's fed right into the womb through the trocar, and it's basically confined to the defect site, and then is pulled back up against the defect. So it covers the full diameter of the trocar, and then some.
Thank you. What kind of facilities and technologies do you anticipate the hospital needing to do the procedure? Like any imaging before deploying the patch, and where can it be done, and all sorts of.
I think any procedure now in fetal surgery, fetoscopic or open access, is a candidate for this procedure using any of the imaging methods that are currently in use. As I said, ultrasound, for example. As I breezed through the slide because I was running out of time, but I think the real market here is for spontaneous prom, because of the numbers of the patients there is much, much larger than iatrogenic. And then if these work, so the idea is beachhead in iatrogenic prom to establish the device efficacy, and then move on to the larger markets, which are S-prom. And ultimately, essentially, we're sealing membrane, so we think it can go into other areas of medicine, for example, dural sealing, any other type of membrane possibly as well.
What kind of testing do you need to do on the adhesive to make sure it's biologically compatible?
Well, we do, in my lab at Berkeley, we do the mouse model of fetal surgery. And then in Zurich, they do a sheep model.
And would you think you could get into humans?
We predict through, if the FDA accepts our proposal for humanitarian device exemption, then we predict probably, I think it was on the slide there, about 2 years, because we have, believe if we're successful, one more round of sheep experiments, a pivotal study in sheep, comparing the device to unsealed defects.
As the non-physician in the group, I am curious what you guys estimate as sort of any expected trauma or complications from the deployment of the implant to the birthing person in this case.
We don't anticipate a whole lot of additional trauma beyond the surgery itself. Most of the trauma is due to the fetoscopic or open access surgery. We're just using our device at the end to seal the defect that is created by the surgical intervention. It's very specific to that fetal membrane defect.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, that was Feto Patch. Okay. Next, we have Grub Sonic Balloon from Caltech, UCSF, and San Jose State.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sungwon Kim. I'm a pediatric surgeon at UCSF. I'm going to be talking about Grub Sonic Balloon, a fetal endoscopic detachable balloon controlled with ultrasound. Our mission is to create a device that will minimize complications during fetal endoscopic tracheal occlusion, Feto, procedure. Feto is used to treat congenital diaphragmatic hernia. The incidence of CDH is about 1 in 3,000 births. This is equivalent to about 1,000 newborn babies born in the United States. However, this is the second most lethal neonatal disease. Survival rate for severe form of CDH is 15%. The treatment for CDH is to provide oxygen and to repair the hernia once the patient is stable. When the patient or the fetus has a severe CDH, these patients are treated with Feto. In severe condition, both the liver and the intestine herniates into the chest, and this prevents the lung from developing. And when the baby is born, the babies cannot oxygenate because of the lung hyperplasia. Feto is done by first paralyzing the baby, and then a port is placed into the womb. And through the port, an endoscope is inserted, and the baby is intubated, and a detachable balloon is deployed into the trachea. The procedure is done at about 27-week gestation, and the balloon is left alone for about 6 weeks. At 34-week gestation, the balloon needs to be removed. This is the 6 weeks is needed for the lung to grow. During the second procedure to remove the balloon, there are 2 ways to remove the balloon. You could needle puncture the balloon. If you cannot do that, then you have to do a repeat endoscopy to remove the balloon. And during the second procedure, complications occur, such as labor or bleeding, which may cause the fetus to die. The current balloon that is used is called the gold balloon, and this was developed in 1974 in Russia to stop arterial bleed in the head. To prevent complication, we need a new balloon that could be removed without doing a second procedure. The value proposition for the Grub Sonic Balloon is to prevent possible early labor and fetal death from second removal procedure. Sorry about the typo there. Also to allow procedures to be done on moderate CDH cases, which may avoid ECMO procedures postnatally. The market size is very small, but the procedure itself is life-saving. By doing the Feto, you could increase the survival rate from 15% to 50%. To make the sonic balloon, we made a valve made of a shape memory polymer. The SMPs are polymer materials that can be deformed, and then by applying a stimulus, such as heat or light, will return its return to its previous shape. So we made a SMP valve that is ultrasound sensitive. We were successful in synthesizing a method to make an SMP that is ultrasound sensitive, as shown on the left panel. We also found that by adding hollow glass microspheres, you could increase the delta T, or transition temperature, by applying ultrasound to 24 degrees Celsius, compared to 8 degrees Celsius without adding the microspheres. In other words, the valve for the sonic balloon is very sensitive to ultrasound. We made a large-scale ultrasound valve and then did a proof of concept study, and the video is shown on the right. Can you play the video?
Yeah. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Now you can see the air coming out of the balloon. Oop. No. Well, the video shows the balloon deflating. And so it doesn't take too long for the balloon to deflate. So the device does work. With the funding received from the Pediatric Maternal Health Funding, we like to make a prototype balloon, as shown on the center panel. This device would have an infusion valve where the water will be injected into the balloon, and on the opposite end is the SMP valve where the water would be released once activated by ultrasound. There is no competition for this device in the current market. The reimbursement strategy that we would use is to use a CPT code to repair CDH in fetus using temporary tracheal occlusion, code S2400. This is a picture of our Sonic Balloon team. Thank you very much.
Open up to our judges. Any questions?
Thank you. Since the market, as you indicated, is so small, do you foresee any other indications for your invention?
Yes, I think one way the SMP could be used is to use it as a stent, for example, in pulmonary artery, where you want, in neonatal or infant patients, where you want to expand the size of the stent. So you could use the ultrasound-activated stent so that you could use ultrasound to make it expand, so you don't have to do a second procedure. That's one example of it.
So this will deflate the balloon. You still have to extract the balloon, and do you know where?
No, it just comes out of the trachea, and it'll be floating within the amniotic fluid. And when the baby is delivered, it'll just come out.
Okay.
Any other questions? Ms. Paul? No? Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Perfect. Our next company is in Lumos from Impact One.
Hi, good morning. Every year in the US, there are 2.5 million vaginal deliveries, and perineal trauma is a common concern, especially for first-time mothers where the incidence and severity is higher. During vaginal delivery, there's a huge stretch to the tissues, to the vaginal opening and surrounding tissues, leading to perineal trauma when there's a lack of distensibility. There are different degrees of severity depending on whether the skin, muscle, or anal sphincter complex are affected. About 85% of patients will suffer perineal trauma that requires surgical repair, and 20% of them will suffer severe perineal trauma. And 1 in 2 of these patients will end up having anal incontinence later in life. So perineal trauma, especially severe perineal trauma, requires complex surgical repair, has high rates of infection and reopening, about 30%, and leads to increased length of stay, visits, pelvic floor rehab, and also increased likelihood of long-term consequences such as pain, prolapse, depression, and also changes on the subsequent mode of delivery. This has a huge cost to the system, and not only that, but most importantly, a huge impact on patients, with 80% reporting having traumatic memories of birth and 25% even regretting having a child. So we must do better, and that's why at Lumos we're innovating for improved outcomes in maternal health. We know that the muscle is the main contributor to the biomechanical properties and also of the consequences of injury. And we also know that a lack of distensibility is correlated with an increase in the incidence and severity of perineal trauma. So by relaxing the muscle, we can increase the diameter and distensibility of the vaginal opening and surrounding tissues, which is a protective adaptation. Unfortunately, due to IP reasons, we cannot disclose like the specific API, but like during the development process, we have taken into consideration safety as the main aspect for both mother and fetus, also having a local effect, and also aspects regarding the workflow. For this reason, we also decided to opt for a repurposing strategy so that we know about the safety profile of the agent. We'll have different layers of protection when it comes to IP, a new indication, but also a novel formulation, and then additional barriers of entry, such as exclusivity due to regulatory reasons, and also being the only FDA-approved product for this indication. As for the regulatory pathway, it will be a 505(b)(2), which allows us to use data of a previous approved drug, and because it's only a change of indication, dosage form and administration route. This pathway is faster and more efficient. And in terms of reimbursement, this will be about $500 per patient, which is aligned with a preliminary value analysis and also with a reimbursement comparable. This will be reimbursed under the Global Maternity Bundle. And in terms of market size, we'll start with first-time vaginal deliveries because the incidence and severity is higher. But if we can prove value in this population, we expect it to be applied in all vaginal deliveries. And we expect to capture a good portion of the market because like the current standard of care, it's perineal massage and heat applied during the second stage of labor, which has workflow, adherence, and usability issues. There's also a potential additional indication because of a similar mechanism of action, which is vaginismus. As for the development timeline, we currently have a proof of concept based on literature and real-world evidence, and we plan to get regulatory approval in 2032. So in order to achieve that, we need support from grants. We currently have support from Spark at Stanford to perform the preclinical research, but we need to consolidate our strategy, mainly the regulatory plan to align it with the validation strategy, also performing a cost-effectiveness analysis that will also inform the pricing, willingness to pay, and reimbursement analysis. And with that, we expect to reduce the risk and make this project attractive for private investment. As for our team, we have a multidisciplinary team with extensive expertise in innovation, entrepreneurship, and a proven track record of building successful, scalable companies. This project came out of biodesign. I'm part of Impact One, and as I mentioned, it has received support from Spark. And yeah, we hope to improve outcomes in maternal health, not only in the US, but also worldwide, and especially in low resource settings where the impact of these consequences is even higher. Thank you.
Would be curious to hear a little bit about stage of development to date and proof points that you have so far.
Yeah, so currently it's mainly based on literature evidence, since as I mentioned, this is a drug repurposing project, so we have a lot of data on the API. And also in terms of the mechanism of action, a lot of evidence on the biomechanics of the muscle and how like changing the distensibility and stiffness of the tissue can lead to a reduction in perineal trauma. So yeah, we have like this evidence. We also know that some of these agents have been used before in full-term pregnant patients for other indications, so we know they are safe. And there's also like off-label use for other indications that have like a shared common mechanism of action, so that's why we believe that this will work. And we're currently starting with the preclinical research to validate, like the hypothesis that by relaxing muscle we can increase distensibility, which has been reported before in literature, but we want to confirm that and also use this information to inform our protocol for the human trials.
Thank you, super helpful. And just a quick follow-up. You mentioned that it's intended for local effect. I'm curious if that is a fundamentally different change in formulation from the other iterations of this particular pharmacologic that are already in use, and if there's any risk associated with that.
Yeah, the main idea was to reduce as much as possible systemic circulation to reduce any potential concerns about fetal safety. So both like the selection of the API, but also in terms of formulation, will be tailored to improve like the local effect and prevent systemic circulation.
Thank you. I was curious, as you talked about relaxation of the muscle, increasing the extendability of the tissue, how do you make sure that that effect is reversible? Like you won't sustain that effect long term, because that's the root cause of any kind of prolapses or any other consequences after vaginal birth.
That's one of the things that we will also need to validate. Like the main idea is at least to prevent like the major, like the more evident trauma on the tissue. So if we can prevent lacerations, but yeah, there's also the potential like long term that just because of the pregnancy and delivery, sometimes like some of these long-term consequences, not so much for renal incontinence, but sometimes urinary incontinence and others, are just like because of the stretch during pregnancy and delivery. But we believe that if we can prevent like at least one of the major causes of trauma, then we can improve outcomes.
Go ahead, Ari.
Last question, just to build a little bit off that. What is your preclinical model approach, and what are the endpoints you're trying to validate in that?
Yeah, for the first preclinical studies, we're mainly validating the mechanism of action. So we are focusing on distensibility as a surrogate measure with small animals, but we know that we will also need to use it in like larger animals to then evaluate changes in incidence and severity. And yeah, so first we're just validating the surrogate endpoint, and then we'll do that. That's also why we need like more funding to align the regulatory strategy with the testing strategy to make sure that we are efficient when doing that.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next company is Vasa Watch.
Good morning, everyone. Vasa Watch is wearable machine learning technology for labor and delivery, improving postpartum hemorrhage risk prediction 10 times beyond the current standard of care. Globally, over 14 million women will experience postpartum hemorrhage this year alone, threatening their lives and their reproductive health. Here in the US, hemorrhage remains the leading cause of death and complications in labor and delivery. And studies show up to 90% of these deaths could have been prevented. Shockingly, 40% of the women who go on to hemorrhage are assessed as low risk upon hospital admission. So Vasa Watch is solving this by introducing a non-invasive wearable that measures maternal heart rate data during labor and delivery, sending this data to a proprietary machine learning algorithm for analysis. And if there are changes in the data indicative of a hemorrhage, an alert is sent to the clinical care team for immediate patient assessment an hour or more ahead of delivery. This allows time for planning, preparation, and prompt treatment once the baby is delivered. Improved risk prediction enables timely treatment. We've conducted an observational study at a large urban Pennsylvania hospital on 403 women in labor and delivery and compared the hospital's risk assessment system to that of the Vasa Watch algorithm. This is where we saw up to 10 times the predictive accuracy with comparable positive and negative predictive values. This research was presented at the Society of Maternal Fetal Medicine at their February pregnancy meeting. Just a few more words about our proprietary algorithm. It was designed to recognize signatures in the PPG waveform signals corresponding to changes in heart rate timing modeled to correlate with myometrial fatigue. Myometrial fatigue is when the blood vessels cannot constrict, the uterine muscle is tired out, and it needs help in order to do this. This is something that progresses during the course of labor and delivery, cannot be detected at admission, and cannot be measured directly. So we believe that we've discovered a new physiological metric to assist clinicians in promptly treating patients. We're reframing the competitive landscape from one of detection, which is reactive, to one of prediction, which is proactive. It's a global market. We estimate a US market size of $500 million. And there's real value here. It's not just a social impact. $1 million of direct variable cost savings in the average hospital system per year, as well as maternal health equity improvements. We'll be selling initially to hospital systems and earning the trust and confidence of the clinicians who need to implement this information, but ultimately our customer will be the payers. The Blue Cross Blue Shield plans have a goal of reducing maternal health inequities by 50% by 2026. Technologies like Vasa Watch can help them achieve that goal, and we are in discussions with them. MedTech vendors can be key to affordability and accessibility. This can be integrated with their existing equipment, both dashboards and pulse oxes that are already in the obstetric suite. They can be huge for scaling the product globally. Our go-to-market approach does involve executing clinical pilots. We need to work through workflow issues at each hospital and clinical practice guideline changes. The team is strong and experienced. We've achieved considerable traction in the past 3 years, including FDA pre-sub meeting, where we'll be going Class 2 de novo software as a medical device. And our roadmap calls for breakthrough device designation application this quarter. Commercialization by 2026. Women are dying needlessly every day. Technologies like Vasa Watch can be part of the solution. Thank you.
Sorry, can you just describe the technology? Is it attached to a pulse ox? How does it work?
Yes, we use the full waveform. So it's not the SpO2 that we're using, but the pulse ox or an ECG can capture the heart rate data that we need. We need the full waveform to operationalize the algorithm.
I anticipate there may be workflow issues even with early detection. How do you demonstrate that you'll have sufficient time to intervene and make a difference?
Well, typically you wouldn't, the first line is the extra dose of the uterotonic. You wouldn't administer that until the baby's delivered. A prophylactic dose of Pitocin is typically standard practice. But if you know an hour ahead, I mean, the blood typing might not be done because 40% of the time you're surprised. You can complete the blood typing. You can have proper resource allocation. When I talk to hospitals, they say, oh, well, typically low-risk births, we assign a resident. They may assign the MFM, the OBGYN to that versus the resident if they expect a hemorrhage. So there's lots of things that can be done when the staff is clear-headed and can plan for it.
So what do you think you would have to show in clinically to demonstrate to get users to use this?
I think we need to show that it makes a material difference. We're talking about that right now in terms of hemorrhages avoided as we design the clinical trial. We're thinking an possible endpoint might be 40% hemorrhage reductions.
You mentioned, given that the technology is an AI/ML offering, I'm curious what you're doing to ensure representative data sets in your training to make sure that you know, this is applicable to all patients. We know the distinct difference in outcomes, particularly in Black maternal care. So would be curious to hear.
Yeah, as far as it's a population health issue, so you know, there's certain criteria, single births and things like that. But our population on the observational study was very diverse, 63% white, 28% Black, and the rest Asian and Hispanic. We've designed the algorithm so we're not using the color of the skin, which would be the amplitude, so that it's a colorblind algorithm. The nuisances are screened out. But we do, the broader the data set we have, the better. And we do need more of a Hispanic and Native American population as well, which we would hope to get in the clinical trial.
And I heard you say that this increased risk prediction could result in perhaps like moving patients from resident practice to an MFM practice and calling other doctors and so forth. How much more resources would you anticipate the hospital needing because of you potentially identifying more people who could be in an increased risk?
Yeah, I think it's just a resource allocation issue versus you know, adding a resource issue. We'll just be better prepared. No one can anticipate the exact time of birth anyway, but if you anticipate which mothers will need attention, we are having discussions. One of the key issues that came out of the Society of Maternal Fetal Medicine was we optimized on predictive accuracy, but clinicians are saying, well, maybe we want negative predictive value to optimize on. Who don't we need to pay attention to? So that's open for discussion, and we believe we can do that within the same algorithm.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Lucy Medical, who will be pitching the Cure device.
Hello. On behalf of the Lucy Medical team, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about a simple medical device that we believe will improve the safety of cesarean deliveries by limiting excessive blood loss following surgery. My name is Kathy Cassidy, and I'm a certified nurse midwife, and today is the 20th anniversary of my first cesarean delivery. For anyone here who's also delivered by cesarean section, you know how hard it is to start your motherhood journey while recovering from major abdominal surgery, even when everything goes well. And cesarean sections are on the rise, and that's concerning because cesarean deliveries come with increased risk of mortality and severe morbidities related to postpartum hemorrhage as compared to vaginal deliveries, along with much higher healthcare costs and longer hospital stays. My longtime colleague, Jennifer Cobb, who's also a nurse midwife, had the unfortunate but common complication of a severe postpartum hemorrhage following her cesarean delivery. And like a lot of new mothers, there was a delay in recognizing that she was hemorrhaging because blood had clotted within her uterus and was not freely flowing out onto the collection pads. But Jennifer was lucky. She survived her postpartum hemorrhage. But not dying or being severely harmed from excessive bleeding after childbirth should not come down to luck. And that's what brings the Lucy Medical team here today. After Jennifer's traumatic near-death experience, she was determined to use her skills and knowledge as a nurse midwife and as a medical device professional to support efforts that would reduce the incidence of excessive bleeding after childbirth. Through her work, helping to commercialize JADA, which is the only approved negative pressure vacuum device that's clear to treat postpartum hemorrhage, she found other professionals who were also deeply committed to finding ways to reduce postpartum hemorrhage around the world. And we're really excited by the simple device that she designed to meet the needs of cesarean sections specifically. Our proposed solution is the Cure device. It's a flexible catheter that's designed to be inserted through the surgical opening after the placenta's been delivered, The distal end is threaded through the cervical canal and out the vagina, and then it's hooked up to a clear canister and a regulated vacuum source. With suction started before the hysterotomy is closed, blood will be continuously evacuated, limiting the ability for blood to clot. And with the closure of the uterus, the negative pressure that comes from the low-level vacuum source should encourage the uterus to contract down, which will naturally limit the blood loss from the placental site. And with the blood being continuously evacuated into a clear canister, the medical team will be better able to measure blood loss in real time. We were awarded our patent in 2023, and we have a clear regulatory pathway with multiple potential predicate devices. We've raised funds through grants and private investors, which are supporting our current R&D efforts, and we're raising funds to support our early feasibility trial, which will occur in the second half of this year, followed by a pivotal trial to support FDA clearance in 2025. Cesarean deliveries are the most common surgery in the US, and we believe that the CARE device can be easily incorporated into current surgical procedures. We are striving to bring this device to market at a cost that makes it feasible for routine use, so that all those who are delivering by cesarean can benefit from this innovation. We believe that mothers deserve to have a safe way to recover from surgery, and anything we can do to expedite their recovery will set the family up for their new life together by avoiding the consequences of excessive blood loss like fatigue, anemia, delayed milk production, depression, and the adverse effects of all the postpartum hemorrhage treatments. Those new mothers can focus on the joyous work of motherhood. So I thank you, and I welcome your questions.
You mentioned a cost target. Are you thinking about this device as utilizable in LMICs as well as US and Europe and the high-income countries?
That's right. So we are designing it to be a single-use product in the US, but we understand that in other low-resource settings that they often will reuse single-use devices, and so we are incorporating that possibility within our design. So right now it can be cleaned with normal cleaning utensils, and we're kind of going through that with our engineers as far as like the potential for reusability.
Any reimbursement information or any kind of thinking about how this will be reimbursed by insurance companies?
Yeah, so it would be included in the DRG, and we are trying to keep it below $400. We believe from the market research we've done that at that cost, there wouldn't be a hesitation to use it in all women.
Any contraindications in terms of like repeat cesareans or anything like that?
There wouldn't be any reason to think that there'd be a contraindication to using it. So it would just be placed, right at the time of the surgery, and then left in place for 30 to, maybe an hour, and then making sure that the uterus stays firm after suction's been discontinued. And if everything looks good, it'll just be slid out through the vagina.
Any other questions from the judges? Paul? Okay.
Okay, thank you
Great,
so much
thank
for
you
your
so much.
consideration.
Okay, so our next company is Seconia Medical. They will be pitching remote. Eric, are you online?
I am, thank you.
Perfect, go right ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Terrific. First, thanks of all, thank you to the Impact One folks for allowing me to participate. I'm very humbled. This is an incredible group of people, and very impressed by everything I've heard today, so thank you. The idea for Partura was born about 20 years ago when I was a new OBGYN serving in the National Health Service Corps in Providence, Rhode Island. I met my now dear friend and co-founder, Stanford's own Dr. Eric Sokol. At that time, Eric was at Women and Infants, starting a 3-year gynecology fellowship. I was on one end of women's health delivering babies, and Eric was quite literally on the other end, repairing pelvic floor obstetric injuries. Between our fields of practice lay a disconnect that was really just too big to ignore, the utter lack of means of consistently and effectively preventing pelvic floor trauma that so often occurs during vaginal childbirth. It took another 10 years of discussing this issue before we landed on our unique approach to this challenging problem. And in 2016, we founded Partura to address this critical need. As many presenters today have discussed and described in great detail, it's well established that obstetric pelvic floor trauma is the single biggest risk factor for the development of pelvic floor disorders. These include pelvic organ prolapse, urinary and fecal incontinence, and chronic pelvic pain and sexual dysfunction. PFDs affect millions of women in the United States and tens of millions of women worldwide. It's an absolutely massive women's health issue that garners shamefully little attention in both the popular press and, more importantly, the public health sphere. Sadly, it's not surprising then that no effective intervention currently exists to prevent obstetric trauma to the pelvic floor. But the need is great, and these numbers tell that story. They've been discussed previously in an undeniable way. 25% of U.S. women suffer from PFD, almost always due to trauma from vaginal births. 1 in 5 of these women will undergo corrective surgery at an estimated annual cost of about $83 billion. And that is, there are untold hundreds of millions of dollars of indirect economic costs due to lost productivity at work and social isolation that result from these terrible disorders. As I mentioned, Dr. Sokol and I spent 10 years thinking and talking about this problem. That was a decade of a lot of personal change for me, during which I got married, started a family, and returned to residency to retrain as a general surgeon. I also joined the Army Medical Corps as a reservist and deployed twice to Afghanistan. It was ultimately from this cross-pollination of obstetrics with general surgery that the concept of our obstetric protection device was born. Dr. Sokol and I believe that we can use a dynamic intravaginal balloon reservoir coupled with a contoured ergonomic handpiece to vastly improve the physics of vaginal delivery and prevent or mitigate damage to the vulnerable tissues of the pelvic floor. We propose that such a device will allow the operator to apply a gentle counter pressure that is, to counteract the forceful perineal descent that's responsible for injury to the perineal body and critical connective tissue structure. Number 2, this device will redirect damaging force vectors up and laterally away from vulnerable central structures, such as the anal sphincter complex. Number 3, reduce resistive forces that promote stretch injuries to nerves, muscles, and pelvic connective tissues by decreasing friction and increasing the vaginal caliber. Lastly, and no less importantly, we believe and strongly hope that our device could also be used to prevent the development of devastating obstetric rectovaginal and vesicovaginal fistulas that affect tens of thousands of women each year who give birth in resource-deprived environments. The magnitude of the need is clear to us at Partura, as there are no interventions currently available to reliably reduce such injuries. We believe there's an enormous commercial market opportunity based on 2.5 to 3 million vaginal births annually in the United States and many more worldwide. The value of effective intervention would provide the value of intervention would provide both immediate benefits stemming from a shorter second stage of labor, such as fewer vaginal lacerations, decreased risk of peripartum infection, and reduced risk of postpartum hemorrhage. Long-term benefits would also include decreased numbers of elective cesarean sections, decreased direct costs for PFD treatment, and decreased indirect economic costs due to loss of productivity and social isolation. As shown in this diagram, our less invasive approach and goal of primary prevention of pelvic floor obstetric injury place Partura's OPD in an ideal position with respect to safety and acceptance by both patients and clinicians. Regulatory analysis has determined our OPD is likely to be an FDA Class II device. And with the existence of numerous more invasive obstetric predicates such as vacuum extractors and forceps, we think that we make a successful 510K pathway is highly probable for our device.
And Eric, we'll just have you wrap it up quickly.
Okay. So I will, yes, I'm going to give you 60 more seconds. Extremely proud of what we've accomplished at Partura over the years with our own financial resources, high-level engineering feasibility, regulatory study analyses that culminated in a cadaver study at Seattle Science Foundation in 2018. That study used a fetal head analog to show posterior forces could be redirected laterally in simulated vaginal birth. We have two beautiful looks-like prototypes, and we recently submitted our phase 1 SBIR grant application. We've also secured intellectual property around the world successfully, and thank you for your attention today. I really appreciate it. Take any questions.
Thank you, Eric. We'll open it up to our judges. Any questions from our judges?
Hi, thank you. What does the preclinical research look like? Like, what do you have in plans in terms of preclinical work?
So thank you. Thanks for the question. So this was our preliminary proof of concept cadaver study that Eric and I did at Seattle Science Foundation in 2018, using a fetal head analog with sensors, using different materials placed into the as we simulated vaginal delivery. These were very preliminary data. They're not, but they did suggest that we were able to favorably alter the posterior forces, redirecting them laterally when using, in particular, materials that had channels of either air or fluid. This was very, very basic, and the thought was to inform engineering going forward in terms of what we were looking for in the intravaginal portion of this device.
And I had another question, like how do you foresee using the device, for example, with surgical vaginal deliveries, and like would every vaginal birthing person be a candidate for this device?
Right now, we have no way of identifying those patients that will suffer pelvic floor trauma, and that's a very big difficulty. So for uncomplicated vaginal delivery, we envision this becoming the standard of care, sort of the way, in my world, using mesh to repair hernias is the standard of care. If we can demonstrate efficacy that reduces that risk by 20%, 30%, 40%, 60%, then there will be no uncomplicated vaginal delivery that will not be delivered using this device. Again, we're simply trying to improve the physics of vaginal delivery to avoid that trauma from the massive forces that we know are generated with pushing coupled with uterine contractions.
Great. Any other questions from the judges? Okay, thank you so much. That was Feto Medical. Okay, and then our last company is also remote, CareNX Innovations, who will be presenting Feto Sense. We have Aditya.
Sure. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Let me share my screen. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
So I'm Dr. Aditya. I run CareNX Innovations, and we have developed Feto Sense, which is an AI-based monitoring platform. Typically, every year, 300,000 babies die because of fetal monitoring aid. If you can, the results.
I'm sorry. Do you want to hold on one second? I'm just checking our tech, if we can get. Or can you turn off your microphone and turn it back on? Sorry, there's a lot of static. Oh yeah, maybe Aditya, could you turn off your video?
Oh,
And come clear. We couldn't understand the presentation, sorry. Okay, let's try again.
Hi, I'm Aditya Kulkarni. I'm the founder and CEO of Carenix Innovations in India. At Carenix, we have developed Feto Sense, which is an AI-based monitoring ecosystem. So every year, more than 300,000 perinatal deaths happen because of inadequate monitoring. To categorize the reasons, major reasons why these mortalities are high, there are two main reasons. One is birth asphyxia, and second, as a consequence of asphyxia, most of the time, baby moves towards premature. 50% of overall infant mortality happens because of these two reasons. Fortunately, we have cardiotocography machines, which are like fetal monitors, which could be used to early assess. However, they are not available everywhere, and fetal monitoring coverage is limited because of their cost, requirement, skill set to operate, portability aspect, as well as expertise needed to interpret results correctly. So we found that in most of the periphery where there are community health centers or primary health centers, crude ways of monitoring do not help in early identifying these situations. And we needed a portable solution for that. If you look at the market, because the most populous countries like India and some African countries, fetal monitoring market is huge, as well as less regulatory hurdles in developing or LMI. Hence, we focused on this problem because of importance and practicality, and developed a miniaturized version of fetal monitor based on smartphone. We call it Feto Sense. Feto Sense does the exact job of CTG, however, provides more analysis, more granular analysis, in order to take decisions on field by even a non-skilled person. And secondly, it allows certain features, for example, remote live monitoring of fetus by an expert while the fetal monitoring test, in order to assist the frontline. When we developed Feto Sense, we also developed an interpretation module, which will patterns of interest in fetal monitoring graph, will provide granular assessment of a factor, and will also be a scoring system, which will give you a strong indicator to whether this baby is moving forward. When we did clinical trials along to compare it with gold standard CTG machines, we found that it is as good as gold standard machines. However, because of computerized analysis, it was better in terms of interpretability and decisions. We got it regulated in India, having CDSCO manufacturing, and got in compliance license for European CE. We are FDA 510K class 2 device. We published results from our clinical trials into International Journal of Family and Reproductive Health. This in 2020, just before COVID, we got a very good response from high influential gynecologists in India. Typically, because of remote monitoring feature, we could get very good traction from them. So we were very unique in terms of as of today, we are into more than 1,000 plus facilities. These facilities reduce NICU admissions by up to 33% just because of proper management of complications. Feto Sense to early detect asphyxia conditions. We are daily screening more than 1,000 patients, and as of today, more than 500,000 patients have been already screened. We are into most top-notch across in some African countries. We are also deploying it in periphery across PHCs and CACs. See how this fetal monitoring can help them reduce risk in the periphery. We also have created different versions of this fetal monitoring system so that multiple patients could be monitored together. Wherever gynecologist is not present, they can monitor it remotely and help lot many patients at the periphery. Our impact thesis is very simple: increasing access to monitoring and detecting conditions like asphyxia early on, so that better management of risk is there. And we have been recognized globally because of this innovation and have been supported by many organizations from time to time. Our next idea is to scale it across country in regions of Africa and Southeast Asia, where this technology would be more relevant and impact. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aditya. We'll open it up to the judges for any questions.
Thank you for that presentation, Aditya. What's the primary monetization path or business case inside of this now that you've have a product and you've deployed it with multiple users in different settings?
Sure. So there are two models. In first model, we sell this device at a fixed price and charge annual maintenance cost for the software support. So the price of the device is around $1,000, which is affordable for most of the private maternity homes. There is another model which is about subscription. So we charge a minimum amount for installation of this device as a deposit and earn recurring revenue by sharing per test price which they get from the customers. For example, per test costs around $5 to $10 depending on the facility. We charge $1 for every test that they will perform through our device. So monthly we will invoice them and get a recurring revenue.
Any other questions? No. Or Paul? Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So it seems like you're utilizing both AI in interpreting the fetal heart rate monitoring, and also a medical professional is interpreting it. Could you clarify that? Or so is there also personnel on your company side that is needed for that interpretation?
So very good question. Actually, we are giving proper interpretation via our AI-based algorithm on the report itself. However, if there is some suspicion, the operator can remotely connect to a gynecologist at any moment in time. All these gynecologists are our existing customers from premium institutes. So they are not our company people, they are the expert gynecologists. In cases of live monitoring, gynecologist will be present while the test is going on, so that the operator doesn't need to interpret anything. As you can see in the report, we have kept a vacant place where conclusion has to be written. That has to be finally written by doctor themselves. However, for immediate on-field decision on whether this patient needs triaging to a tertiary level facility, we assist a non-skilled person there itself by giving them a value of parameter and scoring from 0 to 10 to understand how to take that decision. I hope I made it clear.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, great. Thanks so much, Aditya. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody. That wraps up our competition. Let's give a round of applause for the 9 amazing companies with huge unmet needs in maternal and fetal care. I think up next we will just break shortly, and as we prepare for our next fireside chat.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. We are going to take a quick break, and while we do that, we are looking for your help. So on your tables there and on your screen, there is a QR code, and we're looking for your assistance in voting on what we think the next big innovations in shaping healthcare, pediatric and maternal healthcare will be. So you'll see the question there. We have votes from leaders and innovators across Stanford Medicine Children's Health, voting on the top 4, and we need your help in selecting the 5th. So is it going to be AI, wearables? You see those are listed, and there's some topics that you can choose from or enter in something that you think is not on the list, but will be shaping the future of healthcare. So thank you in advance. And at the end of the day, before we have our closing remarks, we will announce the top 5 innovations. So we're going to take a break. There are some lunch refreshments out in the lobby. Feel free to chat and stick around, and then we'll reconvene here at 11:30 in 24 minutes. So thank you, and we'll see you then. Hi, everyone. It's 11:30. Just calling in everybody to come back from break. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everybody. We're excited to have Dr. Natalie Pagler here, our Chief Health Informatics Officer. Yeah.
Nicely done.
To talk a little bit about some of the innovations going on in DigiIS, and then we'll lead us into a panel on AI, or a fireside chat on AI. So thank you, Dr. Pagler.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Hi, everybody. As Lindsay said, I am the Chief Health Informatics Officer for Stanford Medicine Children's Health, and super excited to be with you here today. Just for those of you who don't know, we have a very large digital information solutions team across Stanford Medicine, and part of that team is our clinical informatics team. I like to define clinical informatics because there's so many different words that are thrown out there and so many different meanings that they evoke. So for our purposes, the way we are defining clinical informatics is the implementation, optimization, and evaluation of our health information and communication systems in the healthcare setting to improve quality of care, patient safety, patient, family, and provider experience, and ultimately outcomes. And we are incredibly lucky to have so many skilled people across our entire health system, including our technologists, nurses, APPs, physicians, all involved in our informatics program. We are also very fortunate to have lots of training opportunities in health informatics across Stanford Children's. So for example, we have a 2-year clinical informatics fellowship for physicians. So this means any physician from any specialty who is board certified or board eligible in their clinical specialty can then do another 2 years specifically working with our clinical informatics and technology teams to learn to bridge that gap between clinical care and technology. We also do class rotations for our biomedical data science masters and PhD students. We also have an APP fellowship that does a rotation through clinical informatics. So really trying to connect that clinical care setting and all of the technology and innovation that is coming through on our information services side. So with that, I wanted to highlight just a couple bits of innovation that our teams have recently done, just to give you an idea of some of the things that we're doing, both here locally, and then hopefully spreading the word, publishing, evaluating, and helping to make changes globally. So the first one that we recently implemented was teen van self-scheduling. This is part of a larger body of work that we do here at Stanford Children's. For children, teens, and their parents, there are a lot of real complexities in terms of engaging digitally. And it turns out we really need to support teens and developing from young children to young adults and taking on more and more autonomy and more confidentiality. And our teen health van is one of the ways that they can do that. This van goes to local schools all over the Bay Area. Arash Anasharvani, who is our medical director, is passionate about adolescent health care. And this new ability for teens to be able to schedule their own appointments on the teen health van ensures that they can get the confidential care when and where they need it. So an incredible advance. Also, something very simple, but that's made a big difference in terms of our patient care, is just the introduction of automated workflows using text messaging with our patients and families. We recently enabled something that sounds so simple, just enabling auto-canceling from your phone. But what that then allows us to do is to open up spots for patients through something called FastPass. So as soon as a spot becomes available through that auto-cancel, it then goes out as a message to all of our families who may be waiting very long times, unfortunately, for our specialty services, and gets them in much quicker. And then finally, robotic process automation. Again, really trying to think about how can we automate our systems? How can we bring AI into the clinical settings? One of the safest and easiest and kind of lowest hanging fruit is thinking about our administrative back office processes. And so we brought in bots into our revenue cycle and accounts payable systems, and has significantly saved the time that our teams are spending so that they can then do more important work. So just a few examples, but we are always excited and to partner with folks and to share what we're doing. And again, I think in terms of really focusing and highlighting some of the unique needs of children and families, that's our team's specialty, and so look forward to partnering with you all and sharing more about that work. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Natalie. Really appreciate you coming in and presenting just a few of the innovations from our DGIS team that impact our patients and families. And really, I think kind of just reminds us that a lot of our innovations are not directly clinical, but still super impactful. So as we think of, I think, healthcare in the healthcare industry innovation, like I was saying before, we really want to think about access and the delivery of care and the maintenance of care. And that's some of the conversations we'll have this afternoon on remote monitoring, really focused on creating equity in the healthcare system and creating equity and really trying to improve healthcare and outcomes. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about our top 5 innovations impacting the future of healthcare. And you all will recall just a few years ago, before the launch of ChatGPT, I believe probably the most compelling innovation that we were thinking about was VR and XR, virtual reality, extended reality, and thinking about how we can have those kind of remote healthcare engagements and experiences, really increasing access in, some fun environments, but definitely impactful environments. So what we wanted to do was take a look at, since now AI really seems to be like the reigning innovation that's impacting all industries, not just healthcare, really think about also other compelling work that's being done, maybe with the help of AI, maybe not. But think about those innovations disrupting healthcare and keep our eye on them. So we have identified top 5, not ranked at all, but we're just from our perspective, what might be those top 5 innovations. So let's see, the 4 that were identified before we started this meeting were 3D printing, artificial intelligence, biotech, gene editing, and wearables. And then the 5th that was just decided today with your voting is sustainability. Wow, I think that's a pretty wide range of innovations when you think about it. And actually, I might be a little bit surprised by sustainability, but I think it really is important that we think about less waste, right? And maintaining our planet. Some of those sustainability technologies are focused on reducing carbon footprints and managing waste in a respectful way for the planet. And I think that's a very important endeavor for healthcare to consider. I think healthcare industries are some of the most impactful on the environment and can definitely move forward for those sustainable practices. So these are our top 5 innovations that we believe are primarily disrupting the future of healthcare in a good way, having a positive impact. So we're going to keep an eye on those and just see where we're going in the next several years and just see if there's something that we've missed. I'd love to have any input here, though. Did any of you all have a chance to vote here? Was there another technology that you think should be on that list? Yes.
Digital twins.
Digital twins, can you say more about that?
Yeah, so the idea is, women who are pregnant and children, it's a hard population to do clinical research on.
Yes.
And so what if we could develop phantoms or some sort of model that represents them but doesn't represent them to do some early stage clinical development work? So then you don't subject moms and babies to that risk, but you can use these digital twins or these models to do that early stage work.
I think that's an interesting idea. I mean, technically, could you generate a digital population to do work on? I mean, I think that's an interesting idea. Have you seen that used in some practice already?
So we're using it at our company. Yeah, so we're using a version of it.
I love that. I think that kind of reminds me as well of synthetic data that is generated for use when startup companies may have difficulty getting access to certain data. Okay, any other comments on a technology disrupting the future of healthcare? Sorry. Yes.
I just have a question about sustainability and cost. They seem to be running kind of at each other, like, you know, reusable. People don't want to do the reusable. And so how do we reconcile that? Do we have to do it at a lower cost, or can we allocate a benefit, you know, kind of like carbon credits, to sustainability in healthcare? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think in order to get people to move forward in a different direction, there has to be some kind of incentive there, and sometimes it's doing the right thing, and sometimes, like you're saying, it's those carbon credits or other credits that you'll get. It could be that for healthcare there is a savings, right? That if you're taking on these sustainable methods, or any other industry, that over time you'll realize savings, that you're not buying these certain things. But you do see in, you know, certain devices that have reusables or consumables versus sterilizing the product and using it over and over again, right? So there's an analysis to be done. Typically, a lot of companies, I've done a lot of analysis on this type of thing in capital finance. The economic model for a business to have consumables that are constantly bought and spent is the model to keep going and to create economic value for that company, but it increases expense to healthcare. So if there's a way to safely sterilize and reuse an instrument, could be more beneficial. But of course, there are a lot of other elements to consider. But I agree, sustainability, that cost. But I'll just say one other thing. Sometimes innovation does add cost to a system, right? So sometimes you may have a new telehealth system or other system that requires professionals to take the calls or review the data or do certain other things that you've optimized maybe upfront care, but you've added cost and personnel for another aspect of it. And that's something we have to consider as well. Our goal is, you know, improving care for the patients and hopefully doing that in a sustainable economic manner. Okay, I will be followed by Natalie and Lindsay for their panel. Oh, Natalie for her panel on AI. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Charlotte. It is my pleasure to invite Dr. Nima Agapur up onto the stage. For those of you who don't know, Dr. Agapur is a clinical associate professor of pediatrics, of anesthesiology, and of biomedical data science. And we are about to have a fascinating conversation about his very unique work. Please welcome Dr. Agapur. And actually, I'm double mic'd, so we will see. Can you all hear me? Okay. Welcome, Dr. Agapur. So great to be able to talk with you. So you have a fascinating title and multiple different roles. Why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about your history and how you got here?
Well, thanks for having me here. Thank you for having me here, and thank you for the kind introduction. I am not a clinical associate professor. I'm a PhD, and if you see me anywhere close to patients, you should call security.
Did I say clinical? Yes, associate professor. Thank you.
Yeah. If I am not the patient, I shouldn't be. I'm fortunate to be part of several initiatives and departments at Stanford. I'm primarily in anesthesiology. Fascinating place to be, especially with OB anesthesia and everything that happens in the NICUs as well. I'm also appointed in pediatrics, primarily neonatology, where we work on premature children. And this interface between maternal and child health between my two roles is pretty fascinating. Finally, I also have a courtesy appointment in biomedical data sciences because of all the computational work that we do. I also am the vice chair for research in data science in the anesthesia department, where I help with junior faculty getting started with their computational research and with setting up team grants and larger research initiatives.
So you're really bored. can tell. So you have, again, a kind of a fascinating approach. So not clinical, and sorry for adding that in, but you are focused on the clinical setting, which I think is so important in this day and age, and figuring out how we translate this important biomedical data science into the clinical setting. And you have had this unique focus on the mother-baby dyad and thinking about how do we take information from the mother and use that to help us better care for the baby. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about that approach and the work you're doing there?
Right. So right now the interface between maternal and child health in the clinic is fairly minimal. That we have our fantastic OBs who take care of the mother, the baby is born, we have our neonatologists and pediatricians. The communication between these disciplines is fairly minimal. But on the scientific end, we know that we need to think about the mom and the baby as a dyad, as one unit. And what happens to the mom has significant consequences for the baby. Now, Stanford is in a unique position that because of the investments that we have made into our informatics systems, we are able to link our data sets across our adult hospital and the children's hospital. That way we have long-term information on the mom many years before they even became pregnant, and we have long-term information on the babies. We can increase that interface between maternal information and newborn information using AI to see what has happened to the mom that has caused something adverse in the newborn and where are the opportunities for interventions. In a paper that we published recently, we showed that we can predict adverse events in newborns in the NICUs several weeks before the baby is even born, which gives us much needed time to prepare for interventions, but also with now cutting-edge fetal surgeries and other technologies, we can potentially even start intervening before the baby is born.
Fascinating. So you are bridging multiple different areas. One here bridging the gap between mother's health and baby's health, which is fascinating. And as you mentioned, you're also really trying to think about how does this work, this biomedical data science work, translate into the clinical setting, and how do we actually intervene based on that? It sounds like you've done a lot of building multidisciplinary teams as one approach to really identifying the right problems. But can you tell me a little bit more about how you are thinking about potential interventions in this space?
Right. So there was, for example, one RCT in JAMA Cardiology a few months ago where they showed that if you deploy a near perfect AI system that can predict adverse outcomes in an RCT setting, half of the patients, the physicians have access to the AI, in the other half they don't. Patient outcomes between the two groups remain the same, even if you could predict adverse events nearly perfectly. Not only that, but clinical decision-making was the same between the two groups. The physicians were looking at these predictions and they were not really changing what is it that they were going to do for the patients. That is very much in line with my own experience. As a machine learning scientist, I love predicting future events. Future of the weather, future of the stock market, that's just something that machine learning algorithms are good at, so naturally we have a hammer, we go try to predict the future. But when I was going through the biodesign process, thank you, Janine, where are you? I quickly learned that when I go into a physician's office and tell them that, look, I can predict all these amazing things long before you could, they tell me that, oh, this is very interesting, fantastic, and so on, which is translated into, can you get out of my office so I can go take care of my patients? That is when I realized that, and all these RCTs that are now published, is when I realized that it's not enough for AI algorithms to just predict the future. If we predict a disease, nobody has a magical pill that's going to stop it. We have to work with the physicians to, yes, predict the future, but also figure out what is it that we are going to do about it. How are we going to change the future, not just predict it? That is very timely because now we have all these new causal AI algorithms that are being developed. They are not quite as popular as generative AI and all the other tools that we have seen, but 5 years from now, they will be. These algorithms will get to a place where they can look at observational data and look at RCT data and tell us not just what is happening in the future, but how we are going to stop that from happening. One example of that is in the NICUs. I told you that we are able to make remarkable predictions in NICUs, but one of the most fascinating things in neonatology is that they have so many levers for changing these patients' outcomes. They have so many interventions at their disposal. It's just not clear how to use them. So now we are doing exactly that in NICUs. We not only just predict the future, but we show that we can set different ventilator settings, or we can come up with different total parenteral nutrition compositions, or we can come up with drugs that previously people were not thinking about that can change the outcomes that we have predicted.
Fascinating. This reminds me so much of some of our early challenges in clinical, in just basic applied clinical informatics from my lens. And when we first started putting in electronic health records, and we were like, oh, yay, we can tell physicians all kinds of things. We can put alerts everywhere, and they're going to love us. Not so much, right? And so it's not just about telling physicians something, it's about helping them to intervene in the right way. So I love your approach and how you're thinking about that. In terms of, kind of thinking about the learning health system and making these micro changes, how are you capturing that data and using that to continually improve the interventions that you're suggesting?
Stanford has really done a fascinating job as an institution, both in Packard and in SHC, at developing informatics infrastructure. I get invited to go give talks in other places often, and I always get this comment that we can't believe you could pull this level of information out of EHRs. And honestly, that is not even on the list of top 10 challenges that I had in these projects, because our investments have made it so easy to get access to large amounts of diverse data sets. Every once in a while, you come across something that is not easily accessible, like you're looking for ventilator settings in ICUs. And okay, you may not be able to immediately get that without talking to anybody out of the data lake, but if you go talk to the right people, a couple months later, $2,000 later, they will get it for you. Part of it is infrastructure, part of it is the can-do attitude of our IT people on the research front, where really they have never told me that, no, we can't give you this data, with the exception of finance maybe. But for the most part, if there is something that they have it, they will go get it for you.
Music to my ears. So glad to hear this.
And that is not the case in other places. When we try to do a validation somewhere else, we have to jump through quite a few extra hoops.
So exciting to hear. I should just say we are definitely open to questions from the audience. So either online or questions in the audience, feel free to raise your hand, and I'll let somebody else do the questioning as well. But I would like to just add one more question about thinking about some of these really advanced interventions and the health equity aspects that we've been touching on throughout the day. How do you think through those kind of sometimes conflicting challenges, and what is your approach to ensuring that these new innovations are also promoting health equity?
Several thoughts about that. AI by itself is a bunch of equations and matrix multiplications. There is nothing in there that by itself would contribute to equity or lack thereof, but it has the potential to take what already exists in our society and amplify it, and make it really visible. Every once in a while, we see these headlines that Google's Bard is racist, and that is not really the right headline. Our society is racist, and Google Bard is showing it to us. Same thing in our healthcare systems. Every once in a while, we learn that this predictive model was consistently suggesting less healthcare expenditure for this particular patient phenotype. Not the machine learning model's fault. That is what the society does, and the machine learning algorithm is reflecting the same thing. But on the positive side, there are opportunities for making the AI algorithms themselves become an auditor of what the society does. That they can detect when is it that, okay, for African American pregnant women, we are spending less money across the board, or we are using different types of interventions. They can audit that and find it for us, and they can flag the places where change is needed. So it really depends on how you look at it, but from my perspective, these AI models are second chance to reset things and look at them quantitatively and objectively. Another opportunity that machine learning models provide is in making everything cheaper and more accessible. I mentioned a project that we have in the lab where we are making total parenteral nutrition a lot more straightforward. Whereas instead of having a neonatologist and a dietitian and a pharmacist figure out what needs to go in the bag and make them one at a time, we have AI algorithms that figure out the composition in advance. You can mass manufacture it in a factory, ship it all over the world. Because the AI has figured out these compositions and how each of them needs to get assigned to a different baby, we've been able to make this 80% cheaper. In the vast majority of the world where we don't have the infrastructure that we have at Stanford, they have to put these kiddos on saline, on water. They are already premature, and we are starving them on top of that. But by using AI algorithms to make everything cheaper, now you can scale it to Southeast Asia, to Africa, to places where normally they wouldn't have access to these types of interventions. Same things with drug discovery, where others have shown that we can take the pharma pipeline that otherwise would cost $2 billion per drug and make it significantly cheaper, more competitive, so that more people have access to it in the long run.
Amazing. That's a great example. So taking a bit of a twist on that theme, you've also been a big advocate of incorporating entrepreneurship for both yourself and your students, and thinking about what are the roles that you have as a researcher, what are the roles that you have as an entrepreneur, what are the different things that you can achieve with these different roles. Can you tell me a little bit more about your perspective on that aspect of your work?
Yeah. There was a time that when I was a trainee, when people were saying that the future of this field is interdisciplinary, and our next generation of scientists need to understand medicine and biology and computation at the same time. I think the next generation, on top of all of that, needs to also understand implementation, because it's not enough to just keep publishing papers and getting grants and giving talks. We have to build real products that actually do something for people. Now with this younger generation that even more than mine cares about impact, that is really the way to have impact beyond publishing papers. I think my role as an educator and as a faculty member here is to, at the very least, be informed enough to be able to help the next generation of trainees to be entrepreneurial. While I'm primarily here at Stanford, I'm absolutely delighted to find the trainees every once in a while who are excited about taking some of our ideas and turning them into a company, and checking to see what the challenges are and if they can find product market fit for it or not. Stanford has a fantastic infrastructure for taking something from an idea or from a research project and gradually developing it into a real product. You've seen some examples of that today, and it's just extremely motivating to know that the work doesn't end by publishing papers, that it actually has a chance at getting implemented in the hospitals.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I mean, clearly we do amazing research here, but as you mentioned, there's the question of how do we take that in vitro research and get it translated into meaningful interventions in the clinical setting. But even then, so often we will be approached by new researchers or young startups, and unless there is a sustainable path for that product to be supported, it may not make it into the health system in a long-term fashion. So that entire pathway from basic science research all the way to some type of sustainable financial model is critical to get it into long-term interventions. I'd like to open up if there are any questions in the audience for Dr. Agapur. We've got one. Can we get a microphone?
The next session that's going to go on is about remote patient monitoring. You know, Epic's notorious for being difficult about getting real-time data in from the home. So what's your approach been lately, and how are you going to address that? Because there's a lot of new data that takes real-time to get it from the home, especially for the mother-baby, 2 months after they go home. How are you going to approach getting that data easier?
Getting that data for research purposes is pretty straightforward. Getting it in for clinical decision making, especially if you want to get it into Epic, is a significantly larger challenge. And, the way I think about this, and I'm certainly biased because I live in the Silicon Valley Stanford bubble, but the way I think about this is, are we forever going to be locked in the Epic ecosystem? Or are there at some point going to be large generational companies with different types of technologies that have envisioned the entire process differently from scratch? Because Epic is built primarily for billing and reimbursement and a little bit of other things, but that is the primary function. And the entire architecture is based on that. The company's culture is based on that. And yes, for now, they have captured a big part of the US market. But my immediate thought on that, and also having seen some of the bets that the venture capitalists are making in other companies, my personal guess is that it's going to need a significant change in who the key players are for us to be able to get to a place where we can pull real-time data from patients' homes or the environments and integrate that into something that is useful enough to guide clinical decision making. It's with the infrastructure that we already have, we certainly have the pieces for pulling information from wearable devices and remote monitoring. And if you jump through enough hoops, you will be able to integrate that into Epic. But is it really going to change clinical decision making? I think that is a much bigger target. It's not just a software engineering problem.
Yeah, I'll jump in, even though I'm supposed to be the interviewer here. But you know, I think we're seeing lots of advances in just interoperability, and I think to Dr. Agapor's point, when you think about clinical decision support, there are basic principles, and thinking about, again, where is that intervention and what channel do you need to make it? It may be within the EHR, Epic in our case here, or it may be at some other point, depending on who is making that decision and when. So I think there are both opportunities to get more data into the right places whenever you need it, and also to think more broadly about where are you trying to intervene. Are you trying to intervene at the EHR and the provider's workflow? Are you trying to intervene directly with the patient and feeding back their own information to them? I see Dr. David Maas in the background, who has set up with his team, fabulous remote patient monitoring program for our type 1 diabetics here. And they have really thought very broadly and partnered with our data scientists to think about how do you get that data in, how do you process it, and where do you serve it into the right person's workflow to change care. So lots of exciting different paths forward, I think, there. Next question.
Dr. Agampur, my question would be again about your project, which I'm super excited about, the maternal nutrition project, neonatal nutrition. So now we are talking about AI, and we always used to talk about AI would give us like more customized medicine, personalized medicine, but you were also able to, let's say, consolidate the different nutritional factors and put it in such a way which would be easier for hospitals to like provide, and it would be easier for logistics. So what is your viewpoint about having a personalized medicine versus having like a consolidated medicine from the AI point of view?
Yeah, so I think before, I'll not talk about that particular project. I'll make a more general comment. When I think before we can talk about personalized and precision medicine, we have to make sure that we can do our classical medicine correctly. We now have algorithms that can look at prescriptions for IV bags for little kiddos and tell you with 90% more accuracy who wrote that prescription. That tells me that there is a huge amount of physician-specific bias in our systems. And I'm sure many in the audience have similar experiences that's the very basis of why when we have a big intervention coming up, we get a second opinion. If all of this was objective and straightforward decision-making, there wouldn't be a need for that. But so much of medicine is complex and based on intuition, based on the provider's personal experiences and case reports and so on, that makes it impossible for complex cases to have a one-size-fits-all solution. You have to have a little bit of an art in there, in addition to the science. I think before we can, for these more complex cases, before we can talk about personalized medicine, we need to make sure we can do the standardization well first. And machine learning algorithms are a strong tool for that. Say that, hey, we have two types of patients. Type 1 consistently needs to get treatment A. Type 2 consistently needs to get treatment B. Let's get that down. Let's make sure everybody is doing that right. Once we have gone after all of those low-hanging fruits, then we can go after the more complicated cases where we need true personalization for every single patient. But I think those cases are few and far between. Right now, there are much bigger low-hanging fruits that we can go after before we need a truly, truly personalized solution for every single patient.
Fascinating thoughts. Do we have time for one last question?
Hi, thank you so much. My question is about kind of disparities in data collection. So while in some parts of the world we might collect a lot of digital data, that may not be true for other parts of the world, and how we think about kind of creating health technology with this data and what it means if the data that we're using is not necessarily equal.
Yeah, that's a very good comment. Every time that today I was telling you that, oh, we have all this amazing infrastructure at Stanford, we can get all these data sets in half an hour. The other way to interpret that is that in other places we don't have access to those. The consequence of that is that more and more of these AI models that are out there will be based on data from resource-rich places where you can quickly access the data. But the good news is that technology in general is also one of the biggest equalizers that we have as a species. Now with wearable devices, with mobile devices, as we learn to create more effective data infrastructures, it becomes easier to collect information. India is close to having very strong electronic health records, and that will immediately add large amounts of data to our global data repositories. So yes, at the very cutting edge, it's a challenge, but when you look on a global scale, I am very optimistic that we will be able to leverage technology to address this, to collect information in places where we previously couldn't.
Yeah, and just to add one additional nuanced thought to that, there's the disparities in data collection because of technology aspects, but there's also just disparities in data collection because of, in pediatrics in general, because of the increased regulatory requirements around using pediatric data, the smaller numbers of children who may be sick, thankfully, and without focused efforts like this symposium, like the work that you're doing on specifically looking at pediatric data and bringing pools of pediatric data together, we can't make advances in this very important space. So thank you for all you are doing. Thank you for everybody's attention and great questions. And I look forward to talking more.
Thank you very much for that exciting discussion on AI. I'd like to invite our panelists up for our discussion on remote monitoring. Is Dr. Tandon on Zoom? Our third panelist?
I'm here.
Hi. Great. Wonderful. There you are. Thanks for joining us. So thank you and welcome to our panel discussion on a topic that has gained a lot of significance recently in the last few years, pediatric remote monitoring in healthcare. And today we're going to be hearing from experts in the forefront of this field, and they're going to share some insights, best practices, and innovative approaches to harnessing this technology for the use of improving the lives of children and families. So I'm really excited to have this group of experts here today joining us. I'm going to have them introduce themselves because I could never do it justice. So we'll go ahead and get started. To my left here with Dr. Maz from Stanford University. If you could introduce yourself and explain a little bit about what you're doing in this field.
Sure. So David Maz, I'm the Lucille Salter Packard Endowed Chair of Pediatrics. I'm also the Chief of Pediatric Endocrinology and Associate Chair for Academic Affairs with Dr. Leonard. And so a little bit about the work we've been doing in remote monitoring. We have a project called the 4T study, which stands for Teamwork, Targets, Technology for Tight Control and Type 1 Diabetes. And this started actually with an MCHRI grant about 6 years ago. We've gone on to then have NIH funding and also working with some of the computer scientists and engineers, have an NSF grant and then a Stanford HAI grant as well. So what this program is trying to address are the improvements that we need to make in pediatric type 1 diabetes care. A1C is a measure of glycemia, and we've known for over 30 years the benefits of having lower A1C, a study called the DCCT study, showing the difference between outcomes if you had an A1C of 7% versus 9%. And they're dramatic and affect the eyes, the kidneys, the nerves, and also heart disease and death. Despite that, 30 years later, the data from the US T1D Exchange Registry shows that the average A1C in adolescents is 8.7%. So that's back, we haven't really made progress in 30 years. So I'll talk a little bit about what we've done to implement a remote patient monitoring and technology program and trying to do it equitably to get better outcomes. And we've gone from 24% of our patients reaching the 7% A1C goal to 64% in our latest cohort paper that'll be out in Nature Medicine next month. So really been the most important part of the T's is teamwork, and so we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Great, thank you. Dr. Bhargava?
So I'm Sumit Bhargava. I'm a clinical professor of pediatrics here at Stanford and a pediatric pulmonary and sleep medicine doctor. So my journey, I think, in innovation and biodesign truly started when I was fortunate enough to get into the Stanford Biodesign Faculty Fellow Program. And thanks to MCHRI for sponsoring that for me, and to Janine for getting me started on this journey that actually brought me to this stage today. My interest is in designing devices. My specific interest is in sleep apnea. And I've been working for the past several years with a colleague from bioengineering here at Stanford on designing a device that is going to be helpful in diagnosing sleep apnea at home. And so I realized many of the same lessons that Dr. Maz just kind of talked about over here, which is the importance of the team approach to science to identify a need as compared to a problem, and to work constructively in a multidisciplinary session to do it. And that is, it's now 2024, and there have been ups and downs, but this is our current prototype. It is the size of a credit card, and we hope it will replace a sleep study. So you can kind of see what is the promise of this process and how things like this that can be done in the home setting, like how Dr. Maas has already implemented, and I hope to do so, can really change many of the things that people really chafe against and complain about in our current healthcare system. And you can't even begin to think of the impact that something like this can have in less resource settings, but that actually have data networks and infrastructure that is better than anything in Europe and America, with India being an example.
Thank you. Great opening remarks. Dr. Tandon, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey, can you guys hear me?
We
Just
can.
to make sure it's working. Okay, so I'm Animesh Tandon. I go by Ashu. I'm a pediatric cardiologist. I've been at Cleveland Clinic Children's for about 2.5 years, and I was at UT Southwestern before that. And my work is in cardiac imaging, and then wearables and remote patient monitoring. And I think we are pretty far behind the endocrinologists and the sleep apnea world in terms of being able to effectively monitor higher risk patients at home. So I have been trying to work on figuring out what's the right hardware we should use, how do we make those data actionable from a clinician perspective, and then also what are the characteristics of these different technologies that will make parents and patients actually use them. And so I'm also the vice chair for innovation at Cleveland Clinic Children's, and then the site PI for the Midwest Pediatric Device Consortium, which I'll try and put a plug in for because I know Stanford has one too.
That's right.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming and for joining us remotely. So I will get started with some questions, and then we will leave some time at the end to open it up. So feel free to enter them online or just raise your hands if you're in the room. So we're going to start with a two-part question. And I'll start with you, Sumit, and then have you answer, David, as well. So what do you see are the key benefits of remote monitoring, and how can remote monitoring technologies help to bridge those gaps that we see in pediatric healthcare, especially thinking about families that are living in underserved areas? So Sumit?
So from my perspective, just listening to a little bit about what Dr. Agipur had talked about and some of the questions that were asked, I think that access is hard. Access is hard no matter where you are. Access is especially hard when you're accessing specialty care, such as the kind of medicine that I practice and the kind of medicine that Dr. Maas practice. So I think remote monitoring improves access. Now that means that you need a robust infrastructure that can respond to the details of that remote monitoring, and also whether it's acute disease that you're looking after. For example, for me, a child who's on a ventilator with some kind of serious disease that might need immediate action, as compared to perhaps a more indolent and chronic disease that needs action, but not in the moment. So I think that that's a great promise of remote monitoring. The other aspect of that is it becomes cheaper the more that you can kind of develop it. And so healthcare costs are so expensive in America that many people go bankrupt just because they are ill. And that happens just as much for families who have children who are seriously ill as compared to individuals. So I think that it can have a huge impact on healthcare economics and the cost of providing healthcare, and to be able to provide the right care at the right time for the right patient can revolutionize the way that care is provided in this country and worldwide.
Very interesting. Thank you. David, anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I'll just shift to diabetes perspective here in my world. But the DCCT study that I mentioned that showed the benefit of more intensive control, what they did in that research study is they had the resources to have weekly visits, multiple phone calls. You can't replicate that in clinical practice. So how do we try to provide the care that we know is more effective? And one thing we've done in our study is now with the use of continuous glucose monitors, and everyone 6-7 years ago when we started the study, people didn't necessarily know what they were. Everyone's seen a Libre commercial or a Dexcom commercial, see Nick Jonas wearing the CGM. So patients come in and they know what these are. These will read glucoses every 5 minutes, and there's the ability to get that data up to the cloud and then down to the physician. So what we've developed with our engineering colleagues who worked in an iterative process with our diabetes educators who are actually doing all the work is to come up with a dashboard so that you can take that data, put it into a usable format, and be able to know some simple metrics. What % time are you wearing the CGM, what your average is, time below range that can be dangerous, and time within range. And so if everything looks fine, you don't need to do any further work on that. However, you can then rank people depending on clinical metrics and have, say, the top 10 people jump to the top of the list so that they can be contacted in between visits. So early people are very, after they've been diagnosed, they're very open to education, to advice on how to take care of their child. And we're able to then catch things in between those quarterly visits. That's traditionally been the way to do it. So that has broken down some barriers and be able to provide care when they need it and as they need it. So that's been really important to just use the technology in a way that will help people. It's also then allowed our diabetes educators to work at the top of their license. So to do that, we had to get some of the work off their plate so that they could do this work at the top of their license. So we were fortunate that hospital allowed us to hire a pharmacy technician who was able to do some of the paperwork for prescription renewals, device renewals, and that's a full-time job. And that was the type of work that our diabetes educators didn't necessarily enjoy doing, but they had to do. And so you have to figure out how to do all this in a team way. And I think that iterative process with the engineers was extremely important to come up with a usable product.
Thank you. So does this allow patients to need to come into clinic less often?
Yeah, that's a great question. Of course, all of this happened during COVID, so we were doing a lot of telehealth. I think going forward, the recommendation is still to do these quarterly visits, either telehealth or in person going forward. Is there the potential to look at that board and say, look, all your metrics look fine. If you don't have any questions, we don't necessarily need to do a visit this quarter. We can put it off. We're not quite there yet, but that's something we've talked about, and I think that's important, that concept of de-implementing care that's not effective. We do a lot of things because we've always done it that way. If it's not worthwhile, why do we do it?
It's a great point, and the reason I was thinking about it was that equity, or the access lens, and just how much of a burden it would remove from the families if they didn't have to come in as often, obviously. So one of the benefits of remote monitoring. So Ashu, I'm going to ask you sort of on the not the other end, but just for some perspective on the challenges and what we might think of as some strategies for overcoming the challenges with remote monitoring and maximizing the benefits of these tools, specifically when we're reaching those underserved patients.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the major topics have been brought up, right? Which is one I think is cost. We have to make sure that that people without high incomes or high socioeconomic status or whatever metric we want to use are able to use the technologies. So that means not only the technology, the cost of the wearable or remote RPM device itself, but also the cost of using it. Do they have to miss work to use it? Do they have internet to be able to send the data, right? And when I lived in Texas and here even in Ohio, there's large urban areas and then there's large rural areas. And so being able to make sure that the technology is available in the non-ivory tower locations and effectively implementable, I think is important. And then one of the other aspects that I'm particularly interested in was hinted at in the prior session. Even if your algorithm or your remote monitoring device is perfect, if no one uses it, it hasn't solved the problem, right? So if you make the world's best baby pulse oximeter, but it needs to be recharged every 5 minutes, no parent's going to do that. And so, how can we learn what's the right trade-off between scientific utility and usability on the patient side and parent and caregiver side that's going to allow the optimal utility, however that's defined? I think we're just starting to understand that because there haven't really been very many options. there were one choice. So you don't have a way to study one choice and whether that's better than another. Now that there's a proliferation of such hardware, then we can really start studying, what those trade-offs are going to be. And I'm very jealous of the endocrinologists who have had many more years of being able to understand how that works than we have in cardiology.
I was just going to say, that's the first time I've ever heard a cardiologist say they're envious of an endocrinologist, so thank you for that.
I understand that. No, that's great, and some really good points. And I think one thing you mentioned before when we were speaking was also that a lot of these products are commercially available for a significant cost, which you spoke to at the very beginning as well. So it'll be interesting to see how this evolves into a marketplace, that is a little bit more accessible for everyone.
And I think that's right. Like right now, if you're trying to buy some of these technologies as a consumer, from national study, national survey studies, we know that they're more used by higher income populations, right? And that I had mentioned earlier, our Pediatric Device Consortium, like the Midwest Pediatric Device Consortium, is specifically trying to understand how do we bring some of these pediatric-focused technologies to rural populations in Ohio and the Midwest, just because of this problem, right? If how's insurance going to cover it? How's it going to be reimbursed? Is it financially feasible for clinicians to use it and patients to use it?
That's great. Glad you're tackling that for us. So, David, what are some challenges and considerations in implementing remote monitoring solutions for children, such as data privacy, parental involvement, which Ashu spoke to briefly, usability, technology accessibility? Can you speak a little bit to this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think a couple of things that have improved, back to Ashu's point. When we started this study, there wasn't universal coverage for continuous glucose monitors. Medi-Cal, the public insurance in California, didn't. You had to do 4 finger pokes a day for 30 days to show that you earned your CGM. So that's changed. And so as we were doing this study, we started out, we had philanthropic support to be able to provide CGMs through a Packard Hospital Auxiliary Grant. As well as MCHRI, but then that changed, so we were able to get that supported, for all our patients via public insurance. Other things that we learned is just with the access to internet, that we had certain patients who it looked like they weren't wearing their CGM. They in fact were. They just didn't have Wi-Fi access. So that taught us that. To get their data, the cheapest way to do that was to give them iPods if they were part of this study. And so that was the cheapest way to have data connectivity. So we learned a lot about how you have to get the data in and work with people in their situations to be able to do that. We did show, and Ananta Adela was the lead author, we had a paper in JAMA Network showing that if in our pilot study, if you looked at people private versus public insurance, English speaking versus non-English speaking, that everyone got a similar benefit from the program. However, there are still gaps. And at first we were disappointed by that, but thinking about all the social determinants of health that go into outcomes, it was perhaps naive to think that those would be eliminated, but introducing technology the way we did it in this program, everyone got a similar benefit. So I think it's important that we have those considerations, that just certain people don't benefit from it, but that everyone has the opportunity to benefit from it. And then in pediatrics particularly, it's going to be the parents who are doing most of this work. So how do you work together with the family? And then as far as data privacy, we've done this via a research project, and I think families have been very open to sharing the data, knowing that the benefit that they're going to get. And now we can show them the benefit that they'll get from it. Another challenge is having access to the data, and the 21st Century Cures Act perhaps is interpreted differently by different companies as far as the ease of getting the data, to put that politely. So we've only worked with one CGM company because that's the only one who will give us access to their data in a way that we can use it. So that's something we're working on, and we can talk more about that.
That's really interesting. Sumit?
So there were a couple of things that I think that Ashu brought up that I think are relevant to someone like me who is essentially developing a device and has the opportunity to try to address some of the issues that were brought up. One is the fact about the rural healthcare desert, which actually is not just in Ohio and the Midwest, but is also there in California. And in fact is true for most locations where multi-specialty children's hospitals are located. They will have people either driving overnight or driving 6 hours and then staying at Ronald McDonald House or some similar place just to get care for their children. That was one of the things that we actually thought about when we were trying to develop a device. That would in fact be so easy to use that it could be used in a population and in a place that doesn't actually have access to specialty healthcare, and could be designed in such a way that even someone with a 6th grade level of education would be able to apply it to their child. The amount of time that it took us to figure that out, to identify these places, to work, to get a grant to work with a professional design company to help us with designing a device that would be simple and easy to apply, that has taken us more than a year, and we are still at this stage that I just showed you, where it kind of looks like a credit card that sort of has an adhesive on one side and is meant to be applied to the body in a certain location in a certain way, which is really what the focus of hopefully our next couple of years of funded work is actually going to be on. Because I truly believe if you can develop the best device in the world, but if no one will use it, it's completely useless. And this, I think, is really the crux of collaboration between engineers and physicians or clinicians, because you want to sort of design devices for humans because you can't really design humans for devices. And that is one of the biggest lessons that I actually learned going through the biodesign experience here at Stanford, which Ashu has also brought up.
That's a great line. Ashu, is there anything you want to add to this?
No, I mean, I think that covers it well. I think really focusing on the end user, but in these health technologies, there are many end users. There's the patient, there's the physician, there's any other members of the care team, there's the insurance company, right? There's the hospital system. Like making sure that there's enough in it for everyone to make sure that it's usable, I think is key. And I think programs like Stanford Biodesign or NSF Core, right? Like these are all designed to help you think about that problem in a way that many physicians, I had never heard of total addressable market till I did I-Core. I was like, oh, no wonder there isn't stuff made for kids. So I think it's, being, as was discussed previously, having some idea about entrepreneurship, even not so that you might be an entrepreneur, which you might, but also knowing why the system is set up the way it is important for us to be able to effectively advocate for our patients.
Yep, absolutely, especially when there's so few of us doing that. So it's really, really great to hear from you all. So I could go on, but I'm going to open it up, make sure we have time for the audience to answer questions. To ask questions and have our panelists answer them. So if you have a question in the room, feel free to raise your hand. I will also be checking online to see if we have any questions there. Yes. Would somebody be able to bring him a mic? He's coming. Thank you.
You made very nice distinction between the need and the problem, exactly in the clinical need. Can you a little bit more clarify, and what was your learning during the biodesign course specifically about that?
So I think coming up with a need was essentially consumed my entire faculty fellowship, which was a 8-month program in which I was still working full time, so I was doing that in the evenings. The program was constructed to allow you to kind of think about clinical problems in a very experiential way. And I think one of the things I benefited from was essentially getting really great feedback on making the distinction between a need and a problem. And one example of that, since we were, I think, talking about the pandemic and its effect on things, is that the pandemic happened. And I remember that that year's Innovation Fellowship and Faculty Fellowship focused on designing ventilators. So they were solving the problem of there not being enough devices for people in respiratory failure, but the need was to design a vaccine. And so to me, that is the distinction between a problem and a need. And so when the vaccine came along and people started getting vaccinated, it made a difference in ending the pandemic, which no number of ventilators would actually have achieved. So to me, that is a distinction between a need and a problem. But I would say that there is a process to it, and people sort of need to go through that biodesign process to be able to understand distinction. Not sure if that was helpful.
Great. We have another question right here.
How have you seen the rollout in like third world countries where, for example, I know you talked about giving iPods to people who didn't have Wi-Fi access. So how have you seen people using the devices? How has it helped them get to more specialized care?
Who would like to speak to that?
Well, I'd say in pediatric diabetes, still the leading cause of death internationally is lack of access to insulin. So unfortunately, that's a real problem. There are programs, Life for a Child, Changing Diabetes in Children, others that are actively engaged in getting insulin and strips, blood glucose monitor strips to children so that they can survive. And there's also been a bit of a shift in the last few years in the thinking to not just survive, but to do better. And another way to think about specifically around devices is it costs about $1 per strip for a blood glucose meter strip. And it's probably, it's about $30 to $50 for every 2 weeks for a continuous glucose monitor. Then you have the transmitter and other costs. But we're probably talking an order of magnitude like 10 more expensive to get a continuous glucose monitor. So if you look at how things have changed, how quickly they've changed in the last couple of decades, I think, can we jump from just getting strips to kids and just getting insulin to having technology that works better for them? So I think there are many, many groups that are actively engaged in trying to do that, but it's really important that we understand in the US what the global situation is in developing countries, that children are simply dying because they don't get diagnosed or they don't have access to insulin. So technology can help with that, but lots of work to be done. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Did you want to add something, Sumit?
Well, I think the question was about how would you use it in less resourced environments. And one of the less resourced environments I'm more familiar with is in India, because I went to medical school there, and I spent 6 months working in a village health center as part of my mandatory internship. And what I learned over there was that there will be lots of people who will be coming, and identifying their issues, in other words, making a diagnosis, is very helpful in allowing them to access care, which in that healthcare system is essentially free. And so I would say that being able to utilize individual healthcare systems to aid in this process would probably be key to making it usable in less resource settings. And then also to reduce the cost of the device to such a sum that people would be willing to make an investment in it in less resource settings. If you think about India, it is one of the largest smartphone markets in the world. As far as cellular connectivity and the number of people who are using cell phones, it exceeds United States and Europe combined. So there is no lack of that infrastructure to be able to use these devices in innovative ways to actually change the course of public health. I just don't think that people have paid enough attention to it so far.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions in the audience? Yes, in the back.
Hi, Elena Kipps from Peds Cardiology. One of the things I worry about is, and we specifically will tell parents of babies with single ventricle heart disease, they're being enrolled in a home monitoring program, so they will have access to a real SAT machine, not one of these, things off Amazon. But we do not want them to be attached to it 24/7. They're supposed to check it like maybe once a day, right in a binder. They have very good access to a nurse practitioner on the other end of that phone. But that's just that specific population, very narrow, for about 6 to 8 weeks of time. After they're Glen, we graduate them, and there's a lot of other kids who might, their parents will ask me, do I get an Owlet? You know, these are people who have resources. They want the SAT monitor, and I say, please don't, because you're going to drive yourself crazy. So I wonder, you know, extrapolating from that baby period to throughout childhood, are we running the risk of creating many more fragile children who are not getting enough exercise, that are not being allowed to be kids and just do their thing, because their parents are constantly asking, oh, did you look at your Apple Watch today? Did the rhythm show it? Like, and not to mention that we have no way to resource answering that phone call every 5 minutes about some nonsense on an Apple Watch for a kid who's fine, who's like, look at the kid's fine. So I worry about the mental health implications. There are some benefits, right? If you're at home in Salinas and you could say, I'm not sure about my kid, oh, the SAT's fine, great. I mean, that could lead to better mental health. But all of the other stress of like having access to this data and how much noise is involved is what I worry about.
That's a great question.
Yeah, great question, Elena. And we've got we're very fortunate, 3 pediatric psychologists who focus on diabetes. And there's that question of what do you do, you know, with all this data, then how do you interact with your child around it? In some ways, it can reduce the tension because you don't have to say, did you check your sugar? Did you check your sugar? You see it and it's there, but there also has to be a discussion on what those boundaries are, particularly around school, right? Are you going to be texting your child every hour to say, oh, your sugar's going up a little bit. What are you doing? It's going down. You know, so to have some clear guidance and to have an open line of communication, and also to let the child speak about it as well. You know, what is it working for them? And if it's not working, you know, they'll take it off and throw it against the wall. You know, so it's like, how do we balance that so that technology improves their quality of life and their health and doesn't cause more conflict to happen? So it's a really important point.
Yeah, that's a great point and acknowledgement. And I'm going to use the last 30 seconds of our time to ask Ashu a question. What are your aspirational goals for remote monitoring in pediatric healthcare?
I think to make it useful and effective. I don't. You know, the other reason I'm jealous of the endocrinologists is because they have a readout, A1C, right? You can target a study for that. In cardiology, I don't think I have an equivalent readout that can tell me how can I define success, right, in this intervention. I think we're still working on that, at least I am. And so I think being able to say that it has effectively reduced some important adverse outcome while not driving parents and patients crazy.
It's a great goal. I like it. So with that, I'm going to thank our esteemed panelists. This has been a wonderful discussion. Thank you for all the work you're doing in this area. I think we have a lot to think about moving forward in terms of access and equity for these tools and these resources. And I really appreciate getting the discussion started here. So thank you, everyone, and thank you to our audience for your participation as well. Next, I'm going to invite Dr. Janine Furch up to announce the winners of the pitch competition. So thank you. Dr. Furch? I would have used my time for another question had I known. Are you guys ready? Last minute. Ooh, suspenseful. That's exciting. Well, here you go.
Thank you. We have the best job today. So do we want to do, yeah, that sounds good. So we are giving away silver, gold, and a platinum award as well that each come with a certain amount of money. So congratulations to one of our first silver award winner, Feto Patch, who's going to receive $12,500. You can come, if your company is here and you are still here, please come up for a photo. Congratulations. Yep. And our other silver winner for $12,500, and of course coaching from our team at Impact One, is Partura Medical.
Thank you very much. It's exciting.
You're welcome. We'll be in touch.
Wonderful.
And now we have two gold awards. Sorry, getting my medals confused. So 2 gold awards, and each of those are going to be $25,000. I should just add again that all of this financial support comes from our philanthropic donors, so we're very grateful for them. And that's going to be Radian Oximetry and Daisy. Okay, our other one is going to be CareNX Innovations for $25,000. I know they're based in India, so I'm not sure if they're still on the line. But congratulations anyhow. And this leaves our platinum winner of our top prize today of $50,000 and continued coaching as all of our winners receive, and that's Lucy Medical. Congratulations. You should come up and you can be in the middle this time. How about that? And now we invite all of our winners that are still here to come up to the stage, and everyone who participated, we will have additional certificates for you as well. And we're labeling you our bronze winners, so we will continue to get coaching and advice and potentially resources there as well. So why don't you stay up here, and then if everyone can come up maybe for a photo, that would be great. Everyone who participated in the pitch competition, all of you guys, I see you out there. Some of you are still here. What? Oh yeah. Come on, Mark. We can sneak in a little bit. Is this okay? No more? You get tighter. Maybe turn to the side. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Congratulations to all who participated in the pitch competition. It was really amazing hearing about the work you're doing for a vulnerable population. So I'm excited to introduce our president and CEO of Stanford Medicine Children's Health. He is going to deliver our closing remarks. And I just want to thank all of you for being here today, and especially our planning team and the speakers, and all of you who have asked questions and continue to be engaged in healthcare innovation. So without further ado, here is Paul King.
I'm sorry I couldn't join you today, but I did have a chance to review all of the submissions for today's event. First, I want to thank Charlotte and her team for organizing this wonderful innovation showcase. I'm in awe of the innovators who participated, and also extend a shout out to the moderators and panelists for generously sharing their wisdom and insights. And thank you to the amazing judges. I don't envy your task at picking a winner from the creative proposals that were submitted. And of course, we have to congratulate the winners of today's showcase. You truly deserve the recognition and support. Although only a few were designated as winners, all of the innovators are to be commended for their work in support of maternal and pediatric health. I'm sure that most of you know that over the last decade, the maternal mortality rate in the United States has nearly doubled. And many of you are familiar with Dr. Lloyd Miner's frequent description of what we try to do here at Stanford Medicine, which is to predict, prevent, and cure precisely disease and affliction. At Stanford Medicine Children's Health, our vision statement reads that we want to heal humanity through science and compassion, one child and family at a time. Our care teams tackle some of the most complex pediatric and maternal health issues. I am deeply grateful for how they apply their expertise and compassion to provide new mothers and our youngest patients a better quality of life. The motivation behind development of the devices and products that were reviewed at today's showcase is absolutely consistent with our mission, vision, strategy, and priorities. So there really were no losers. And the biggest winners, of course, are our patients and their families. Lastly, I want to thank all of you who took the time to join us today, to learn, to share, and to cheer on those whose ideas were featured at today's competition. We hope to see you again at next year's showcase. Have a great day.
All right, everyone. So with that, we just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. And we also want to create this space to continue connecting and also building relationships. So we will have a networking session here today and then also in the hall. So feel free to stay, connect with one another, and we hope to see you next year. So once again, thank you to everyone who participated and who joined us here today, and we hope you have a great day. Bye.